Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to everyone present in the chamber or listening on the live stream or indeed joining us through the website and time shifting to this meeting of Lincolnshire County Council's Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee. I am Ian Carrington, Councillor Ian Carrington. I'm chairman of the committee. With me is Councillor Martin Griggs, who is the vice chairman. A number of other councillors and officers will join us in the course of the morning, and I will introduce those as they come up. Could I please remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online as the meeting recording remains on the Council's website. Few health and safety notes. We do not have a fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to treat that as a real alarm and leave the chamber through the two doors at the back, that's that end, and assemble in the front car park to await further instructions. Could I ask everybody to make sure that your mobiles, laptops, iPads or other devices are on silent for the duration of the meeting, and the hearing loop is now activated. If anybody needs assistance with that, please make yourselves known. Seeing no one, we will move on. Requests to speak will be collated by Councillor Griggs. We'll try and ensure that everybody has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. However, I will close down the debate to ensure that we keep to time, so I would appreciate contributions being succinct and concise, and I'd also ask that you indicate early when you wish to speak. And we will now move to the formal agenda, starting with item 1. Emily Wilcox, who is our Democratic Services Officer this morning. Emily, do we have apologies for absence or replacement members?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillor Linda Wotton.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 2, declaration of members' interests. This is an opportunity for members to declare any pecuniary or other interests. Do members wish to declare any? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. I think probably in common with most people in this chamber, I have been bombarded with text messages which might even have the undesired effect, but I shall try to keep an open mind.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm seeing no others. As usual, if any member realises that they do have an interest as we move through the agenda, please make it known at the time. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of April 2024. This item is to approve and sign the minutes of the last meeting as a correct record, and you will find all those details in pages 5 to 14, of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer for those minutes? Councillor Fleetwood, and seconded by the Vice Chairman. Any comments before we move to the vote on those minutes? In that case, we will now vote. Those in favour of those minutes being a true record? Thank you very much. Any abstentions? Any objections? That is carried. That is carried. Thank you. Those are agreed as a correct record. Item 4, announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Lead Officers. I would like to take this opportunity to welcome Councillor Neil Murray to the meeting. He's not quite with us yet. I think he's running slightly late, but he will be joining this committee. He will be very welcome as and when he arrives. We also note that Councillor Ashley Baxter is now present as Shadow Executive Portfolio Holder for Economic Development, Environment and Planning. And today he's joining us in his new capacity, but also in relation to item 5, as his ward is Deepings West and Rural. For that item, we will also be joined by Mr. Glenn Fuller, Chairman of West Deeping Parish Council, and Councillor Phil Dilks, who will be addressing the committee as a local ward member as well. I would just like to mention the committee's visit to the Energy from Waste facility last week on the 23rd, and thank very much all involved for arranging it and those who hosted us. We went on a guided tour of this very, very important facility, and we had first-hand experience of the various stages of the process. For the moment the bin collection truck arrives to the final stage of waste being transformed into energy and indeed ash, which is then itself recycled into a variety of materials and uses. And I would like to thank our hosts at FCC Environment and the County Council's waste team for their time and valued work, not only in taking us around, but this is a 24/7 operation, making sure that that facility works. We have less than a third of 1% of household rubbish goes to landfill in this county, and that is not least because of our excellent recycling rates, though those can always be improved, but also because of the operation 24/7 of this facility. 190,000 tonnes plus a year of rubbish is turned into energy, electricity, and that's electricity for more than 25,000 homes. So I would like to repeat my thanks. It was an excellent visit. They do have open days every year or two. They actually just had one, and I can definitely recommend that to other members and members of the public. So we have a busy agenda ahead of us today, excuse me, and that includes consideration of 3 pre-decision items. I would therefore like to begin by asking those who are present. We have some feedback through the speakers. Can we sort that? We're working on that, my apologies. I would like to ask those presenting reports to take these as read by members and only summarise key points of the type of input expected by the committee. And introductions of reports will be kept at 5 minutes to ensure that we have sufficient time to consider and debate. So, moving first to Executive Councillor announcements. Do we have any announcements from Councillor Colin Davey, Executive Councillor for Economic Development, Environment and Planning, who I understand may be joining us online? Colin, are you there?
I am indeed, Chairman, and hope you all had a good weekend. I'm going to keep my announcements very short this morning because you have got a very busy agenda. Firstly, UK Reef concluded on the 23rd of May, and this was a hugely successful event for Greater Lincolnshire. For the first time, we presented a combined Greater Lincolnshire Pavilion, supported and attended by the investment teams from all of the Greater Lincolnshire local authorities. The pavilion theme showcased our strongest sector propositions as investment opportunities, with the intention to raise the Greater Lincolnshire profile nationally, educate investors around the huge potential of the region, and provide a location for inviting investors and delegates to meet with us all and learn more. The event was attended by over 13,000 delegates, with all 3 days being very busy welcoming guests. I was able to speak with many high-profile visitors and spent significant time with Sir John Peace, Chairman of the Midlands Engine, where we discussed the role of Lincolnshire in the wider Midlands context and the opportunities for the future. We held 2 dedicated speaker sessions in the Midlands Engine Pavilion on the first day of the event. The topics for these sessions were sustainable food production, UK Food Valley, and the continued development of Greater Lincolnshire at the forefront of low-carbon energy. These panels were chaired by Alison Hands, the CEO of Lincolnshire Co-op, and Simon Green, the CEO of Humber Freeport. And they were supported by other executives from their respective industries. Both sessions were very well received and attended, leading to excellent conversations and further meetings back at the Greater Lincolnshire Pavilion. Finally, Team Lincolnshire held a fringe evening networking event, which was attended by 172 ambassadors and their guests in total. The collaboration and connectivity this brings to keep and extend partnerships across our county is a well-known approach for Team Lincolnshire, which continues to grow and expand. In summary, it's an extremely successful event, which will see detailed follow-up meetings and new relationships made over the coming months to continue to build the region's profile in sectors that are at the heart of the county's and country's priorities for the future. Another success in partnership building and profile raising is the work that we are pushing forward to support the agriculture and horticultural sector, following the work of our own Scrutiny panel. The first meeting of the renewed Greater Lincolnshire Agriculture and Horticultural Forum took place on the 17th of May, and was hugely well received by those who attended. Future agenda items will include developing key messages back into government, sector skills, water, soil, land use policy, as well as succession planning and family business dynamics. A number of people attending that event wish to pass their thanks on to the members of this council who are championing this agenda, not just our authority, but also across the wider region. There is strong recognition that LCC has an important influencing and enabling role to play locally and nationally. I'm working with officers to ensure that members of the council, who have been so important in driving this issue forward, continue to be involved in these discussions. We will be promoting this work at the Lincolnshire show, and we have shared some postcards with you today that will be used on the day. It is important that we keep Lincolnshire growing, not just for our sake, but for the sake of the nation. I'll leave it there, Chairman. Happy to take any questions on any matters that members wish to raise.
Thank you very much indeed. Questions? Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the portfolio holder. On the 16th of May, the government said that the deadline for a decision on Mallard Pass Farm was being moved back by a month to the 13th of June. Do you think that decision will be made on the 13th of June, or has anything else happened that might have interrupted the flow?
Well, firstly, Councillor Baxter, as you know, the decision was imminent, and then the government made their announcement in relation to food security and use of best and most versatile land. And the next day, the decision was put back to the 13th of June. Obviously, we weren't expecting an election to be called so quickly. So the answer to the question is, I don't honestly know. I hope they will come out with a decision on the 13th of June as promised, because it's quite clear that the decision is written and it sits with the planning inspectorate to issue it. It obviously will be the decision of the minister in post whether to accept that recommendation from the planning inspector. But I hope they don't delay it any further.
If I could just ask a supplementary on that, Colin. I take it that the new decision would have to be taken with the new ministerial guidance taken into account.
That would be my understanding, Chairman, that the guidance is now part of the decision-making process. So yes, the decision should reflect that guidance.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Baxter, you happy with that? Excellent. We'll move on. Do we have any other announcements from any other executive member or sporting councillor? I'm seeing none. Therefore, do we have any announcements from senior officers? I am seeing none. So we may now move on to the next item. This is the Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan Preferred Approach for Updating the Plan. Excuse me. As part of its pre-decision scrutiny function, the committee is presented with a report addressed to the executive on this matter. The report to the executive can be found on pages 15 to 170 of the agenda pack. Excuse me. The Lincolnshire Minerals and Waste Local Plan, originally covering the period until 2031, is undergoing an update to ensure that its policies remain current and effective. The Preferred Approach document, which is attached as Appendix A to the report, represents the second stage of this update process. Upon approval by the executive, it will be released for public consultation. The document extends the plan period to 2041 and includes a comprehensive set of proposed updated policies for minerals and waste development. It also designates preferred sites to meet future aggregate mineral needs. The Preferred Approach document has been developed based on feedback from an issues and options consultation conducted in the summer of 2022. A decision on this matter will be taken by the executive on the 4th of June 2024. So I just repeat, at this stage we are at a point in a process, but the final decision will not be taken until further stages in that process and further consultation. Now, before we start this item, which there's been a great deal of interest in, I would like to just set out how the item will be handled, as we do have a number of speakers. So the running order will be as follows. Firstly, Neil McBride, who's Head of Planning, and Richard Leonard, Principal Policy and Programme Officer for Contributors, will introduce the report. I will then invite Mr. Glenn Fuller, who is with us this morning. Mr. Fuller is Chairman of West Deeping Parish Council, to make a statement. And Mr. Fuller, you will have 3 minutes to address the committee. I will then invite committee members to ask any clarifying questions at their discretion. Following this, I will then invite Councillor Ashley Baxter, local ward member for Deepings West and Rural, to address the committee regarding Mr. Fuller's statement for a maximum of 3 minutes. There will then be an opportunity for committee members to ask Councillor Baxter any clarifying questions. We will then turn to Councillor Phil Dilks, local ward member for Deepings East, who will also address the committee regarding Mr. Fuller's statement for a maximum of 3 minutes. And again, there will then be an opportunity for members to ask Councillor Dilks any clarifying questions. This will then be followed by a debate in committee, which will consider and comment on the report and highlight any recommendations or further actions for consideration by the executive. Neil, Richard and other officers will be able to answer questions from committee members as part of that wider debate. However, there will be no further involvement from members of the public during this part of the item. I hope everybody was clear on that. It is quite complicated. However, the beginning is pretty simple. We will go back to Mr. McBride and Mr. Leonard and ask them to introduce the report. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman. I've prepared a brief presentation to assist the committee in consideration of this item this morning, but obviously mindful of your request for things to be kept as succinct as possible. I'll keep it as brief as I can. So if we just go on to the first slide, please. As members are aware, the County Council is in the process of updating its Minerals and Waste Local Plan. The existing adopted plan is made up of 2 documents, the core strategy, which was adopted in June 2016, and the site locations document that was adopted in December 2017. The plan, as we've heard, covers a period to 2031. Following a review of both parts of the plan, the County Council commenced work on updating it in 2021, and that new plan will be prepared as a single document with a proposed extended plan period to 2041. Have next slide, please. The updating of the plan is required to follow a number of stages as prescribed in planning legislation, including several stages of public consultation and a formal examination process to ensure the views of communities, stakeholders and other interested parties are taken into account and that it meets all legal requirements. This slide sets out the key stages of plan production, and further details are provided in the report and in the Council's statement of community involvement. The timetable for this process is set out in the Minerals and Waste Development Scheme. Members will note that we've experienced some delays to the timetable due to the large number of comments and site nominations that have been received. Up-to-date milestones are therefore included in the report for information, and the Minerals and Waste Development Scheme will be updated in due course. Next slide, please. In terms of our progress with updating the plan, following the initial issues and options consultation and the call for sites in summer 2022, officers have been busy evaluating consultation responses, gathering information, formulating policies and carrying out detailed assessments of the sites that have been submitted. All of this work has culminated in the production of a document setting out the Council's preferred approach for updating the plan, and it is this document which is presented to the committee members today. Next slide, please. We're therefore at the second stage, as we've heard, of updating the plan, where subject to the consideration by this Scrutiny Committee and the approval of the Executive, it's proposed to publish the preferred approach document for public consultation in July for a period of at least 6 weeks. The preferred approach document is effectively a draft plan and contains a full suite of proposed policies and includes provisional allocations or preferred sites for future mineral extraction. This consultation will therefore allow communities, stakeholders and other interested parties to provide their views on the draft proposals within the document and, if appropriate, put forward alternative options. Next slide, please. In terms of the key proposals within the preferred approach document, it's proposed to make provision for a total shortfall over the plan period of 21.91 million tonnes of sand and gravel and 10.19 million tonnes of limestone. The figure for sand and gravel has been slightly updated to reflect more recent planning permissions that have been granted. It's proposed to make provision for this shortfall firstly by carrying forward allocations from the existing adopted minerals and waste local plan, where there have been no significant changes in circumstances. The remaining shortfall is then proposed to be met from new allocations, so that it's selected from those submitted during the call for sites exercise and following a comprehensive site assessment process. One point to note is that traditionally in Lincolnshire, sand and gravel production has been divided between 3 different production areas in the county. However, due to changes in how the industry operates and limitations on sales data availability, this is no longer possible, and we're moving towards a county-wide approach. Go to the next slide, thank you. The preferred sites proposed for allocation at this stage are set out in the report, but they're listed again on this slide just for ease of reference. Table 1 shows those allocations within the existing minerals and waste local plan proposed to be carried forward, and tables 2 and 3 set out the additional preferred sites that are proposed for allocation at this stage to make up the rest of the shortfall. In relation to sand and gravel, sites SG16 and SG17 in table 2 are based upon sites that are already allocated in the existing minerals and waste local plan, but they've been reassessed rather than being automatically carried forward due to changes in circumstances on those sites. With regard to limestone, there are no existing allocations within the plan for limestone extraction. Therefore, the entire shortfall is proposed to be met by sites selected from those submitted during the call for sites. As set out in the report, the provision within these sites collectively would exceed the shortfalls over the plan period, but this would allow for the maintenance of a spatial distribution of sites across the county, and it provides some flexibility should demand exceed forecast levels. The preferred sites have been selected following a comprehensive site assessment process, which has accounted for a large amount of the work that officers have been involved in since the issues and options was carried out in 2022. And this slide just provides a brief summary of that process, which included detailed constraints analysis, targeted consultation with selected organisations, site visits and further engagement and seeking further information from those site promoters. All of the information collected as part of this process will be reported in a site assessment report, which will be published alongside the preferred approach document for consultation. This will set out the reasoning behind which sites have been identified as preferred sites and those which have been discounted at this stage. It is important to note, however, that there are still a number of stages of the plan making process left, and therefore the provisional allocations may be subject to change depending on the outcome of future consultations and any additional information or new site nominations that may be received. Next slide, please, thank you. So we are aware that there's been a lot of interest in one of the preferred sites in particular, site SG17 at West Deeping, and so have selected this as an example just to provide a bit more detail about how we've approached this site assessment process and to assist members with some of the context for this site. So as outlined, SG17 is already allocated in the existing plan as site MS29SL, but it has been reassessed rather than being automatically carried forward due to a change in circumstances in relation to how the site is proposed to be worked. It is no longer proposed as an extension, and it is now being proposed by a different mineral operator as a new site to replace their existing operation. In assessing the site, officers have given due regard to the fact that the site has been previously subject to comprehensive assessment, formal examination by a planning inspector and deemed acceptable for allocation in the existing minerals and waste local plan. And the assessment has therefore focused in particular on the elements of the proposals that now differ from the existing allocation, namely that it would include a plant site and a new access. No significant issues have been identified with regard to the introduction of these new elements that could not be assessed and mitigated at planning application stage. While there are a number of constraints affecting this site that will need careful consideration, no insurmountable or significant impacts have been identified at this stage that could not otherwise be mitigated through appropriate planning controls. Concerns have been raised in relation to particular heritage assets. However, officers have consulted with the Council's Historic Places team, and it is considered that such impacts could be mitigated. And members will be aware that we've received a significant amount of correspondence and comments from local residents in relation to this site, and where appropriate, these will be given due regard as part of our site assessment process. The Minerals and Waste Local Plan is also required to ensure that there's sufficient waste management capacity to meet Lincolnshire's needs. As set out in the report, data shows that Lincolnshire already has sufficient capacity to accommodate predicted future waste arisings beyond the plan period. Therefore, no allocations for waste development are proposed to be included in the new plan. Despite this lack of need, it will still be necessary for the new plan to provide a suitable policy framework in order to guide and assess future waste developments that may come forward during the plan period. It's therefore proposed to retain criteria-based policies to ensure that waste proposals are directed to the most sustainable locations, and a lot of work has been done to simplify those policies, as those in the current plan were identified as potentially being too complicated. Thank you. Other changes being proposed in the preferred approach document include the introduction of an overarching policy on sustainable development and climate change in order to make clear that this sits at the heart of the plan, a more proportionate approach to the safeguarding of mineral resources to reduce the burden on developers and planning authorities. The development management policies within the plan have been streamlined and updated, and whilst it is proposed to retain a restrictive approach to landfill, amendments are proposed in relation to the recovery of inert waste in the restoration of mineral sites. As set out in the report, a range of background documents are proposed to be published alongside the preferred approach consultation, including a site assessment report, as already mentioned. A consultation statement will provide details of the outcomes of the earlier consultation undertaken at issues and options stage, and other technical documents will include a sustainability appraisal report, a habitat regulations assessment, and a strategic flood risk assessment. To summarise then, following consideration by this committee and subject to the approval of the executive, it's proposed that the preferred approach document will be published for consultation. Local communities, stakeholders and other interested parties will be invited to make comments on the proposed policies and preferred sites set out in that consultation document, and if appropriate, put forward alternative approaches. A further call for sites exercise will also be carried out to allow interested parties a further opportunity to nominate potential sites for allocation in the new plan, or to provide further information in support of any previously nominated sites. Following consultation on the preferred approach, the Council will consider all responses received and a proposed submission version of the updated plan will be produced. This will be the document that the Council then intends to submit to the Secretary of State, following at first being subject to a further period of formal consultation. It's important, therefore, to reiterate that the document being considered today is the Council's preferred approach. It's not the final plan at this stage. The approach and sites currently identified could therefore change depending on the outcome of the consultation and others that follow, and any other information that becomes available. The reason for publishing the preferred approach document is to allow communities and stakeholders to provide their feedback on and influence the draft proposals before a final document is produced for public examination. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that very thorough introduction to the report. Mr McBride, do you have anything to add at this stage? Members of the committee will have the opportunity to ask any questions which come up of officers later in the debate. At this point, I will move on to Mr Fuller. Mr Fuller, you are now invited to address the committee. If you engage your microphone, you will have a little red collar on it, and from one point when you're ready, you will have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, councillors, and thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. Today you're being asked to approve the commencement of the consultation on the Mineral and Waste Local Plan. However, it is our contention that the methodology behind the preferred approach supplied by the Minerals team is unsound and unsafe. The inclusion of site SG17 in West Deeping as the only preferred site in South Lincolnshire does not align with LCC's site selection policies. Your site selection process has 5 exclusionary criteria, and SG17 falls into criterion 5, being immediately adjacent to the Grade 2 star listed Molesey Mill. This should preclude it from further consideration. The Minerals team have acknowledged the site's location on many occasions, including in their own development brief, which state that the site is adjacent to Grade 2 star Molesey's Mill in the Granary, and in a recent scoping response, Mr McBride confirmed that this is one of 2 listed buildings abutting the site. Yet the Minerals and Waste team have omitted this fact when assessing the site against Level 1 criteria, as they did back in 2016. Mr McBride argues that the mill's designation should be considered under Level 2 criteria, claiming that the listed building's distance of 100 metres from its garden's boundary does not constitute immediate adjacency. This interpretation is not his to make, and it has misled the decision-making process. NPPF guidance clearly states that listed building's curtilage and setting should not be ignored and form part of the listing. Statutory consultee Historic England has expressed strong concerns, stating that mining this site could cause severe and substantial harm to the setting and operation of the Grade 2 star watermill. They argue that the site allocation fails to comply with several NPPF requirements, including delivering a positive strategy for the historic environment, protecting or enhancing the historic environment, conserving heritage assets appropriately, and preserving or enhancing its conservation area. Statutory consultees are consulted for their expertise in order to protect our communities, our environment and our heritage. Ignoring their opinions because they may differ from the Mineral and Waste team's narrow perspective undermines their role. Just 20 metres from the proposed open cast mine boundary and in Molesey's garden sits lock pen number 9 of the Stamford Canal, one of England's earliest post-Roman canals. Mr Molesey's paddock, identified in the 1813 Enclosure Act, forms part of the gardens of Molesey, which stretch up the river, a river which is essential to the operation of the Grade 2 star listed watermill and forms the entire southern boundary of the site. Whilst mature trees sit amongst the gardens of Molesey, they only provide minimal screening from the proposed open cast mines. Let me repeat, Historic England believes mining this site could result in severe and substantial harm to the Grade 2 star listed watermill. Mr McBride continues to ignore their advice. We acknowledge the challenges that the Minerals and Waste team face in ensuring a steady supply of minerals. However, planning policies exist to balance open cast mining with the health, lives and amenity of people. These policies are crucial for protecting our communities and our heritage. Residents of West Deeping are already pursuing legal action against LCC for not properly considering the effects of the original allocation of MS29 on their health and well-being. We are prepared to pursue a judicial review if SG17 is further considered. Ignoring the rules for the convenience at the expense of residents' health and national heritage is unacceptable. Please do not make the same mistake twice. You cannot recommend this draft plan to the Executive in its current form with the inclusion of SG17 when the methodology that has been used to prepare it is unsound. Enough is enough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr Fuller, and thank you very much indeed for sticking to time. Do we now have any member who wishes to ask a follow-up question in relation to Mr Fuller's statement? Any committee member? Councillor Cook, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr Fuller, for your speech there. Obviously, in the report before us today, it mentions that the site has undergone comprehensive assessment and was deemed acceptable for allocation by the planning inspector as per MS29, and that the Minerals and Waste team have therefore only focused in assessing the site this time around on the changes to the original allocation, which are the access and the plant site location. Are you saying this is the wrong approach, and should the team be taking a different approach? I do have one further question as well, Chairman.
Mr Fuller.
Thank you, Councillor. In 2014 to 2016, we believe a mistake was made, which has misled the entire process. Just assessing the site on the previous allocation does not really understand the changes that bringing the processing plant and the making a new quarry to this side of to the village side of the road has the effect on the village. Essentially, you're bringing an industrial development for 40 plus years right in the view of over half the houses in the village. Obviously, West Deeping has endured quarrying for over 70 years on our doorstep, with currently Cemex and Breedon operating north of the A1175. The cumulative impact on the village is immense, with this relentless quarrying leaving no opportunity for communities, the landscape, and the ecology to recover. It is inevitable, if permission is given for SG 17, that SG 11 also included in the preferred sites, in the call for sites document, which is the extra 170 hectares south of the road, will be given permission, because that will be an extension to this existing quarry. So we're not talking here about a little 6-7 year site, which was assessed back in 2014-16 as an extension to the existing operations. What we're talking about is a 30 to 40 year enormous site that will blight the village for many years to come. Recent planning in West Deeping has allowed the quarry companies to come within 25 metres of people's homes north of the road. There is no reason that this shouldn't be continued here.
Just pause for a second while we sort this feedback out. That should be okay now, Mr. Fuller.
Thank you. So exacerbating the problem really is you can't just assess this site just on the fact that there will be a new access and a new processing plant. It affects so much more of the application, and we still contend that the process was wrong back in 2014 to 16.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Fuller. Briefly, Councillor Cook.
Thank you. It follows on from the point Mr. Leonard made, actually, in terms of the constraints of the site being mitigated against. And I'd be interested to hear Mr. Fuller's opinions as to whether or not that site can be mitigated against if this was to go ahead.
Mr. Fuller, to you, but concisely. If
Sorry, yes. Very briefly then, when you put a site through this process and allocate it, you're already consenting to the site, and therefore you're already saying that this quarry will go ahead, albeit with a few planning conditions. There are many policies in place. You have DM17, which covers the cumulative impact, DM3, the quality of life of residents. You've got the water environment, DM6, and you've got DM16 is the water resources. Mitigation essentially means to make a bad situation slightly better. In West Deeping, we know about all the adverse effects of quarrying and open cast mining, and we know how detrimental to the village that is. So yes, you could mitigate various aspects of this, but it's still just making a terrible situation worse, and it's very, very close to the village, and it threatens the listed building. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Does any other member of the committee have a question for Mr. Fuller? I'm seeing none. In that case, Mr. Fuller, thank you very much indeed for contributing this morning. I hope you'll follow the rest of the debate, but as you know, you have to do that from the public gallery, and someone will now show you how to get there. But thank you very much indeed for your contribution. I'd now like to invite Councillor Ashley Baxter, who is the local member for Deepings West and Rural Division, to add his comments on the matter. Over to you, Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to Mr. Fuller for coming all the way to Lincoln to talk on behalf of his parish and his parish council residents. The process is about allowing communities to provide feedback, we are told, but there was plenty of feedback was given to the council during the first process when the parish council was invited. I'd like to know from the officers how many responses were received from West Deeping at that time. My division of Deepings West and Rural, half of it is under threat from a solar. The residents are very cross about a solar application, Mallard Pass. The other half is either already mined or under threat of being mined for minerals and waste. The main, would it be possible, please, Chair, to bring up the slide that shows this particular application on the slide that was there?
If we can, we shall.
Yeah. May I interrupt my 3 minutes for?
We'll pause the clock, Ashley.
Is it on the presentation?
Just have to, we didn't have prior notice, so we're just getting the technology into shape. Bear with us. those who are only listening on the live stream, we're just getting a computer to find some pictures for Councillor Baxter. The silence doesn't mean your system has failed. Is that the one?
That's it, yes, thank you.
Away you go.
Phil's just told me I'm on 2 minutes and 59 seconds.
Well, thank you very much indeed, actually.
So this is the site which is causing most of the consternation, not just in my ward, but much further afield. What you can't see from that slide is that to the left of the red line is the village of West Deeping, where every house on, it's a ribbon development, and every house on the right-hand side will have their view wrecked, I guess. What you can't see on that map is that everything north of the Stamford Road, which is the top of the red line, has already been mined or is being mined for minerals and waste. And what you can't see on that slide is that to the right is Multi-Mill, a listed building, which Mr. Fuller has already explained. And what you can't see on that map is that the bottom of that red blob, it follows the line of the River Welland. It is impossible to dig that amount of minerals and waste without damaging the flow and the course and the stability of the River Welland. That is why people are so unhappy about it. Except that some of that land is already allocated under a previous allocation, but the new preferred site includes a production plant. The production plant, which is already for many years at the north of the road, has caused noise and light and dust and lorries and other pollution. And what you're saying to the residents of West Deeping and to all the people who use Stamford Road on a regular basis is that there's now going to be a new entrance, new danger, new wagons, but also more noise, dust, light and interference by putting the production plant on the south of the road. I think if you left the production site on the north of the road, it might be a different thing. So where I'm getting to with this is the rest of the plan, the principles and so on, I understand it's a process that needs to go out to consultation, but it would make the rest of the process much more seamless and much more tolerable if SG17 was removed as an allocation. The SG17 is the most offensive of the sites across Lincolnshire which are being prepared because it's being done to the residents of West Deeping. The residents of West Deeping who for decades have put up with the mining on the north side of the Stamford Road are now being asked for all, okay, I'll wind up. They're being asked for all of the land between the mill, almost to Market Deeping, right up to almost the backs of their houses, becomes this stage of a mine. Please reject SG17.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Baxter. We now move, actually we don't. We invite questions again because you're not here as a member of the committee. So, does any member of the committee have any question which they wish to put to Councillor Baxter? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for indulging me on this one. Councillor Baxter, obviously you and I both know the area very well. In terms of the existing quarrying that's already taken place, do you want to talk about the current condition of the areas that have currently been left as such in terms of the remediation and what it currently looks like for those members that don't know the area?
Councillor Baxter.
Thank you for the question. Some members who sit on the planning committee will have had site visit to the as Mr. Fuller calls it, the open cast mine on the north side of the site, where it looks like an open cast mine. When you see things on David Attenborough or whatever showing mining, it was when I arrived in the Deepings, it was green fields and tranquil countryside. It now looks like a mine. further along the road, where some of the Tallington Lakes, which were originally gravel pits or mineral extraction, that also is a state for reasons that I can't go into, but for fear of litigation. But yes, there is some amenity return to the community, decades hence from now, but that's a state. The King Street is a state. The traffic from King Street, where the production plant is at the moment, is always a mess and usually dangerous, be it due to the lorries going up and down King Street and also round Stamford Road. This will destroy the open countryside that is between Molesey Mill and West Deeping.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for Councillor Baxter before we move on? Seeing none, I now turn to Councillor Phil Dilks, who is the local member for Deeping's East Division, to comment on the matter. Phil.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As I think you heard, both Councillor Baxter Division and mine, I have got no doubt, would be severely adversely impacted by these proposals for massive extensions to open cast gravel workings. Local residents feel we've been an easy target to extract millions of tonnes of sand and gravel for far too many years, with our local communities and villages suffering noise, dust, pollution, thundering lorries, and paying the price of years of having acres of open cast mines on what was historically agricultural land. If you saw a map, and I know there isn't one, but if you were shown a map of the area, you would see what residents fear about their communities being transformed into islands, villages being transformed into islands by the next gravel workings. Local residents feel betrayed, having seen a site allocated in West Deeping some years ago for gravel workings to the south of the old A16, and they now face that allocation being replaced with massive, much bigger workings coming within yards of their homes, hitting the local economy and particularly damaging businesses such as the thriving wedding mill at Molesey Mill in a listed building. There are also real concerns about the impact on the water table. I've got 5 questions I'd like to ask members to consider as part of your scrutiny function today. First, is it legal? The question we all ask ourselves as councillors in any decision. I asked the Scrutiny Committee to fully consider. I understand you may have been bombarded, as Councillor Austin says, with legal and other sort of considerations, but I would ask you to scrutinise the potential legal challenges in correspondence sent to you, Mr. Chairman, and members of your committee. Should the proposals before you be voted through today and accepted by Executive, in the event that such legal challenges are upheld, would you and members of this committee be liable as has been suggested? So as a county councillor, I'm really asking, is it legal? How many million tonnes of sand and gravel do you think have already been extracted from West Deeping, Baston and Langtoft? How many more millions do you think we can be reasonably extracted? Is there really no limit? As has been said, enough is enough. Traffic regulation orders. What's planned for these new workings? And since Langtoft allocation MS27 is also listed here for 2.5 million tonnes of sand and gravel extraction, may I say Langtoft Parish Council already feel badly let down that they actually claim they were promised a traffic regulation order to stop lorries from local gravel pits taking shortcuts through the village, but nothing happened. Can I be assured that TROs will be put in place and enforced this time? Fourthly, almost any other type of major development impacting a community would see the local area benefiting from improved infrastructure through Section 106 or SIL agreements. Can you confirm there's no such benefit under planning law for a local community blighted by an open cast sand and gravel mine? And finally, I note that there were 450 comments on these proposals. Have they been published? Where can I, as a county councillor, access copies of the comments? How many of them, as Councillor Baxter have asked, were concerned West Deeping particularly, but also Baston or Langtoft? In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, I believe, you know, this land was agricultural land. We get concerned with over solar panels when we have applications for solar panels on agricultural land and other developments. We should be concerned about the agricultural land here. And also, I'm particularly concerned, I have to say, about the effect on the water table, as has been mentioned. So I would seek your assurances that we're not going to be damaging the water table. Thank you for your forbearance. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Dilks. As with our previous speakers, do we have any questions from members of the committee for Councillor Dilks? Seeing none, I thank you, Phil, for those comments, and we now move forward to the formal debate on the item. And at this point, of course, members of the committee can put questions themselves to officers. Councillor Spratt, I think, was first. Councillor Spratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I add my comments to those that were made by Councillor Austin earlier? I would suspect we've mostly had text messages or phone calls or emails. I want to make a point that I haven't purposely responded to any of them because I wanted to listen to the evidence put forward at the committee today. Interestingly, on page 39 of the paper pack, or page 11 of the report, at 1.26, it says, at this stage it is possible to nominate further sites. And I understand that. I found it interesting that the report didn't comment, from what I've seen of the report, unless it's escaped my attention, but there's nothing in there about deallocating particular sites along the lines that Councillor Dilks and Councillor Baxter mentioned. So my question is it possible to withdraw sites along the lines that my two colleagues have said in terms of law or procedure? So is it possible to deallocate, I suppose the technical term would be, because it may be, I don't know, but it may be that this report could go through with an amendment, potentially. So I'd just like the answer to that question because it might influence the way I vote, Chairman.
And a very interesting question. I turn to our officers. Who's going to pick this one up, Richard or Neil?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, so in terms of the deallocation of sites, as we've all heard, this is obviously the preferred approach. It's still a draft plan, so things are you know, open to change. And as we go to the next stage of the plan, following consultation, we may have new sites put forward, we may have further information come forward in relation to the existing sites that are proposed. So yeah, anything could change. If we get advised of a new site that may be less impactful in terms of local amenity, then there may be changes. Some sites may get knocked out, some sites may come in. It's you know, part of the process. So it is very much an open book at this stage. In terms of recommendations to this committee in deallocating sites, obviously your comments will be reported over to the executive, but if we were to change the position in the current plan, we'd need to have robust reasons for doing that. Thank you.
So just so the committee members are completely clear, I think what we should take out as a committee from that is that this is still a stage which is relatively fluid. The sites are neither allocated nor deallocated in a formal sense. Well, some of them already are, but the amendment, the update to the plan hasn't gone through yet. Therefore, as part of that process, things could be dropped or indeed new things could be introduced. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And also there'll be a review of the evidence, data will change, mineral sales data is constantly updated, so the amount of provision and the shortfall may vary, which will impact on how many sites are required as well.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Spratt, does that answer your question?
Thank you. I mean, it's all well and good. I can't see the officer's name, I'm ever so sorry, the point he made, but you could, officers, anybody, any professional could put forward a point of view to support an argument that they make. It is equally arguable, I would suggest, that people who are against this could put forward equally powerful cases not to do something. And on the evidence I've heard this morning, I'm persuaded that SG17 should not be in the final plan. For the reasons that have been put forward. Sorry, Chairman.
I understand that, and I think the purpose of this morning's debate is so that we can, A, hear external evidence and the evidence, of course, from our local councillors, and then we can pass those comments forward. So if the committee has concerns, whether it's a single member or whether it's the committee as a whole, about a particular site, providing we put those concerns forward fully and with proper grounds, that is our function to do. So we'll note your view and we'll see how that's reflected as the debate goes on. But it is certainly my intention to ask that every comment that we've heard, both from our guests and from members of the committee, are passed through to the Executive Board so that that is there for them as background in full when they come to consider the matter later this summer.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bowles, you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Spratt asked basically the question I was going to ask, so I completely sort of support what he said and the position he's in. However, whilst I share his position in terms of what I've heard today, I'm also minded that what we're being asked to do is open the public consultation on it. So I'm sat on the fence, I guess. I'd like to ask a question: if we do, the comments and support are to go forward with the public consultation, would the final plan come back to this committee for debate? And if that is the case, of part of that process, I don't know about other members, but for me personally, I feel it would be beneficial if we do go down that route for this committee to have a site visit to see what has been described by others, because I've got no, other than what I've been told by members of the public and the local members, I've got no knowledge or understanding of that area. So I'd be more minded to go forward with the consultation on the understanding that it comes back to this committee and we are afforded the opportunity to actually visit the site and have a better understanding for ourselves if we discuss this again, is my question. Thanks.
As far as the site visit is concerned, I'll discuss that with officers. I think some of us, through the planning process, have had the benefit of that. It does seem to me that it's a little unfair on those who haven't had that opportunity, so we'll look into that for you. Could I just ask for confirmation on the matter of the process from our officers, please, that it will come back to this committee after the next phase of consideration?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, that's the process. So what we're asking for today is that the committee support or move forward with the recommendation that we start the consultation process, and we'll go out to consultation for a period of at least 6 weeks. And then once we've finished that process, we'll review the comments that are received through that, and then bring forward, probably about this time next year, a report which will come to the Scrutiny Committee and go through the Executive and ultimately to Council, with a recommendation based on what we had in terms of the consultations and other information that becomes available during that period. So certainly the answer to your question is that a further report, once we've gone through the consultation stage, will come back to this committee, and you'll have an opportunity to see not only what local residents have said, but other key stakeholders like Historic England, and we'll put all that information in their report, and the recommendations will obviously be based on what feedback we get through the consultation as well.
Thank you, Mr. McBride. And just to be clear, that would then have 3 stages of democratic accountability: this committee, the Executive Board, and the full Council. Okay, Councillor Bowles, is that answer your question? Excellent. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the only issue that I would take with the response that we've just received is that now is the time for us to shape the consultation before it goes out. So therefore, picking up on the points that Councillor Spratt has made, I'm certainly happy, or perhaps minded later on in this debate, to move an amendment to the report as presented. I think for clarity, I'd just like to state, obviously many of you know I was for 12 years a district councillor with my ward that directly adjoined site SG17. I know a number of the residents in West Deeping. I know the residents of Multi Estate. I have no financial disclosurable pecuniary interest in this, but I do still have regular contact with residents that I used to represent. So I do have a few questions that I would like answered by our team, please. So I think one of the first things that concerns me is that we are being asked to recommend something to go to consultation when we don't have the full details. We don't have all the addendums, we don't have all the reports, we don't have the details of the sites that have been disregarded. And I think for me, that is an issue. And I think, you know, when are those reports going to go public? When are they going to be published on our website? And I think it's a shame that as a committee, we are being asked to consider something when we don't have the full information. So when will all the information be ready for this document? That's my first question, Chairman.
Mr. McBride.
Thank you, Chairman. So the intention is that the consultation will start sometime in early July. And at that time, all those reports will be available as part of the consultation and will be on the website and for people to view. The local communities to understand the reasons as to why the sites that we're recommending to go forward are the evidence behind that process, essentially.
Ms. McBride, I'll come back to you, Callum, but I think you may I hope you understand Callum's frustration that the committee is being asked to consider something with a very short time before it is going to be considered by the Executive Board. Was there any particular reason why the reports and the evidence which Councillor Cook is referring to has not already been provided to us? And was it your intention to provide all that material in total to the Executive Board as well?
I think to make sure that the progress of the local plan doesn't sort of get delayed any further, because we're well aware of the concerns that the local communities have expressed about the particular site, and to prevent further delays, we felt that we needed to bring the reports to this Scrutiny Committee and to the Executive next week to make sure that we were able to start the consultation, the public consultation, before the sort of summer holiday start. So that's the reason why we want to make sure that we meet that timescale, and some of the reports unfortunately haven't yet all been completed, but they will be available as part of that public consultation exercise for residents and all the other stakeholders to view, and that's primarily the reason as to why all the documents aren't currently available for the Scrutiny Committee and the Executive.
So, and again, Councillor Cook will forgive me if I just tease a little bit more information out here. Could you tell us exactly what these reports are and confirm that if, as I understand it, the plan is for that next stage of consultation to go out in July, we're now at the very back end of May, and I think the Executive Board are due to consider this particular item, is it on the 4th of June? I think on the 4th of June. It's only a month or so ahead of these reports being prepared. Are you not concerned that this committee and indeed the board might be being asked to comment in detail on a matter that's very important without being fully seized of all the material? So again, if in replying you could just run us through what reports we don't have now that will be available in July, please.
Thank you. One of the slides set out in my presentation listed some of the key reports. So the sites and areas report being the main one that identifies the reasons behind why sites are proposed for allocation at this stage and the reasons why others have been discounted. There'll also be a detailed consultation statement which will go through all of the issues that were raised at the issues and options stage and set out how the council's responded to those in the new preferred approach document. And then there'll be a range of more technical appraisals to meet various legal requirements such as sustainability appraisal, habitat regulations assessment, and they look in more detail at balancing economic, social, environmental objectives and ensuring that we meet the various requirements of the statutory legislation that we're required to follow.
Thank you for that. Back to you, Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the follow-up points. I mean, I'm not satisfied with the answers that you have just provided. We are being asked to make a recommendation on reports that we have not seen. And indeed, I was prepared to make a minor amendment to this. I'm more tempted at the present time to defer it back and to come back to this committee when we actually have all the information so we can make a legal and sound decision. We know the challenges and implications that a number of residents have raised from across this county in terms of taking legal action against this county council. And the first stage, as us as Scrutiny, we are being asked to make a decision on something that we haven't even got the whole information. Now, in my professional day job, I work in community consultation and engagement on development projects, not mining or quarrying, I will add, but in terms of development projects. And the worst time that you would go out to consultation is over the summer holidays. Indeed, we do not do any consultation over summer holidays. And yet you are proposing that we are to go out to consultation in July when most of the schools break up. Now, if there hadn't been a rush for whatever perceived idea, I would have said that this should be going out to consultation in September, or it should have gone out well before now. So I'm not satisfied with the current place in terms of where we are, in terms of communications and engagement on this the scheme. I don't know if either officers would like to make a comment on that. I have got a couple of other questions as well.
Officers?
I think in terms of the consultation, that's why we want to start it in early July. So there'll be at least 3 weeks before the summer holidays actually start. So people will have an opportunity to view those documents in advance of the main school holidays starting. And then obviously, there's still a further 3 weeks after the school holidays where people are able to make the comments. So, I mean, I think that there's always difficulty, whatever time of year that you look to do consultations, there's always a concern about it being too close to Christmas or Easter, and that we have to obviously recognise that we want to move forward with the progress of making the local plan going forward. So we have to identify a window where we feel is the best possible time to do the consultation, or to do it in a time that doesn't delay the process too much. And that's why we've identified the start of July as being the period that will enable us to do that. I recognise, no matter when you do it, there's always a counterbalance as to that it's the wrong time, but it's got to be done at some period, and we think that's the time that we can do it and make people aware of the process.
I think just on that though, in terms of a consultation, it has to be sound and meaningful. And my question on this is that the 2 times of year you don't do consultations with the public are Christmas and summer holidays. And that's from my own professional background in terms of what I do as a day job. And that's working with similar clients to the people that will be doing the quarrying as well. However, we'll move on. So in terms of the other 5 sites that were proposed in South Lincolnshire, which have not been put forwards, how many were situated so close to a population village, a conservation area, and to have an impact on such a highly listed heritage asset?
Thank you. I don't have the details of all of the sites right in front of me now to go through and give you a list of every site, but I can say that within South Lincolnshire, the sites that have been assessed and have been discounted have been subject to significant constraints, proximity to internationally designated sites of nature conservation, lack of information from site promoters in terms of the deliverability of the sites or the presence of mineral resources. So there's a whole raft of reasons why sites have been knocked out. This site, we acknowledge that it's in proximity to a number of constraints, but as set out in the presentation, we've carried out an assessment. We're mindful that this site is already allocated, it's been assessed, and we're happy that the constraints can be mitigated.
Thank you, Chair. Just a final one for now, and then I'll obviously open up the table. I think the other thing that surprised me in your presentation is you mentioned about how the County Council was moving away from you were moving towards a county-wide approach from the obviously previous zones that I think we used to look at in terms of quarrying and minerals. I think actually, if we were to look at the data in terms of what South Lincolnshire has delivered over the last plan period, I think we have delivered well above and beyond our allocation, and probably part of the reason why we're now creating a county-wide issue is because other areas are not doing or delivering their numbers and percentages of minerals, and actually South Lincolnshire is being asked to deliver even more when residents in our local area, of which I used to represent and still represent down in Stamford, are quite frankly getting a bit fed up of this now. And I think that's my only fear, is that we've now moved on to a county-wide approach when South Lincolnshire has already well above delivered its aspirations.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cook. I think Councillor Haig's you're next.
Thank you, Chairman. With what information that's been presented today, I have a great deal of difficulty supporting this application as it stands at the moment. There are too many things that haven't been answered correct. We haven't been given enough information on this. I would have liked to have compared the other sites that were under consideration with this one. I would have liked to have drawn my own conclusions whether the other sites this was the best site out of the other ones. I just feel that we haven't got anywhere near enough detailed information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And next we move to Councillor Murray. I did welcome you as a new member of the committee. You hadn't quite arrived at that point, so can I repeat the welcome? You're very welcome to the committee, and we look forward to having your views, and in fact we look forward to having them right now. What are your comments on this particular item?
Thank you, Chair. My comment is don't rely on public transport. It's not very good in Lincoln. That's why I was a little bit late. My concern relating to the DP's application is related to democratic sustainability. We obviously talk about sustainability, but I can't see any mention of democratic accountability in the sense of, do the local population want this? Should it be forced upon them? And it's obviously an extremely unpopular proposal with the residents. And I've looked very carefully over the weekend and the last few days at what residents and their representatives have said, and I can understand their frustration and their anger, because looking at the photographs, I've never actually been there, but looking at the photographs, it's a huge use of what looks like very good agricultural land, and I can understand residents asking the question, when is enough is enough?
Thank you very much for that. I guess just not for me to answer the point, but I think in terms of democratic accountability, well, we are us, and as we've heard at a later stage, it would go both through executive board and full council. And don't forget parish councils, said a parish councillor himself, who play a very important role, and we've heard from Mr. Fuller earlier on. But we'll move on to our next speaker, who is the Vice Chairman, Councillor Griggs.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will just declare I had Mr. Mooney on the phone Friday evening, and he caught me off guard, so I didn't offer an opinion, but I thought it rude to hang up and say, no, I'm not discussing, and that's not influenced my opinion here today. I'm extremely concerned. The fact that so many residents have reached out and contacted me, and I don't represent the area, for one, shows a lot of red flags, because that doesn't normally happen. Mr. Fuller pointed out a key thought that I would imagine echoes many of our residents across Lincolnshire, and that's an extension on the future, or an extension on the site in the future, because once you've allowed something, well, it's not as bad to have a bit more of it. And I feel that many of our residents feel that if we go out to consultation, that's a rubber stamp, off we go, it's going to happen. I'm extremely concerned, and I don't want to repeat everything Councillor Cook did, that we're being asked to make a decision or agree to go out to consultation at a really bad time of the year without the documents. We as a scrutiny authority, it's our job to make objective decisions and not sit there and be at the mercy of people's emotions and feelings. However, we're not presented with the data in which to make an objective decision, which I find to be honest, reasonably deplorable, because we have a legal duty to our residents to make sure everything's safe, in the words of Councillor Dilks, to make sure it's legal, and I don't feel we can with the report in front of us. So I think, personally, it's unacceptable. Thank you very much.
The next speaker is Councillor Spratt.
Councillor Spratt, you wanted to come back, and then Councillor Cook wanted to come back, and then I might have a word myself. But Councillor Spratt.
Yeah, I'm just slightly confused. We make a decision today, conclusions, recommendations to the executive on the 4th of June, and then we have a further consultation in July. And the reason I'm confused, it just seems a bit upside down.
I think the answer to that question is, and I'll ask officers to confirm, that we are being asked to comment as the executive board is being asked to approve.
I appreciate that, and I'm making a comment that it seems upside down. That's my comment, because if, as I think Councillor Cook made clear, and also Councillor Dilks on the legal argument, if that was to go before a court on judicial review, and I think it was Councillor Cook mentioned judicial review, I didn't, not initially, I think it would put the council in quite a bad position, actually. Thank you. Unless I come back to what you're going to say.
I will check with officers, but let's remember that we are in a plan-making process here, and the stages in a plan-making process are set out very clearly, and that's quite separate from do we have the right evidence to make a decision. But the various stages that we have to go through, I think, are set out. So could officers, before we move on to other members who wish to speak, just revisit Councillor Spratt's point about the process, please, whether we are, as it were, topsy-turvy, or whether we are following a course of action which is set down by higher authority as to how we make plans.
Thank you. In terms of process, we're following a procedure set out in the Town and Country Planning Regulations in terms of the stages we go through to produce this plan. The issues and options stage, the preferred approach, there'll be a proposed submission version. All of them go through the committee process, through executive for approval. So we're following a prescribed process in terms of the legalities of producing a plan. In terms of the consideration of information, I don't have anything to add beyond what Neil's already explained. Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I've not actually probably done this in a committee meeting before. But look, we are the Scrutiny Committee, and the decisions that we take, whether that's a recommendation or a principal decision, we have to be satisfied with the information that is presented to us, that it is sound, and that we have full understanding of the decision we are about to take. In my opinion, I've only been a councillor for 13 years now, we do not have the full information, even to make the decision to refer it to the executive for it to go out to consultation. Therefore, I'm going to make a proposal that we defer this agenda item to a future committee meeting where we have the full reports, where we have the full information with regards to all the sites, whether they are supported for quarrying and minerals or whether they are rejected. And there should also be a comprehensive consultation plan accompanying that, outlining when we are going to consultation at the best time of year, so we actually are not accused of not doing a meaningful consultation. I think we've got expressions from members here that wish to be on a site visit, but at the present time, I do not feel satisfied that we have the full information to take a decision on this today, and I would request and hope that members would support this being deferred to a future meeting where it can be represented with the full information.
Under normal circumstances, I would call for a seconder, and I think as far as heart is concerned, I think everybody in the room would understand exactly where you're coming from. But I'm informed, and I'll turn to our officer in a moment, that technically we cannot defer the matter. We can express a view that we would have deferred it. We can certainly pass all of our concerns and those which have been put to us to the executive board, and we can request that it comes back. But it is on the board's agenda for June. But I'd ask Emily to comment on that in more detail, please.
Yeah, it's just clarifying that the decision is by the executive, so it's not the Scrutiny Committee's decision to make. Obviously, you can make a recommendation that you wish for this to be deferred, but it wouldn't be a decision to be made by the Scrutiny Committee.
I mean, I'd seek clarification on that because that's not what I'm used to in scrutiny. But in terms of the actions required in points 1 and 2 on the agenda, considers the attached report and determines whether the committee supports the recommendations to the executive as set out in the report. Well, that's simply a case of, no, then I do not support the recommendations because we do not have the full information and therefore it shouldn't be referred to the executive.
That's a rather different matter to deferral, and yes.
I'm trying to find a compromise, Chairman, where we are not saying no, I'm saying let's defer it and bring it back. We have the Cabinet member for the
Councillor
environment.
Cook, I was
sat
actually
here.
speaking. You may not have noticed. Thank you. It is very much the role of this committee to make sure that the Executive Board is made aware of the views of this committee, and they've been pretty forceful and on a consistent line. Councillor Spratt, I'll come to you. Your hand is going up and down, but if you would just be patient for a moment. There are other people also waiting to speak. Technically, we may not be able to defer, and it is in any case going to be heard by the Executive Board. Our job, as in the actions before us in draft on the paper, is to advise the Executive Board, and I'm sure we can find a form of words which will do that. Councillor Taylor, you have been waiting extremely patiently while a number of people have been speaking. Please, let's hear your views, and then we'll go back to Councillor Spratt.
Chairman, some serious concerns are being raised in this report, also in this debate. This does affect quality of life for residents in West Epping. These are serious issues, and we are, Chairman, you referred to this being a point in the process. We are here as a scrutiny committee to undertake a scrutiny function. Unfortunately, as colleagues have referred to previously, there is some gaps in information. This does seem rather incomplete. We've been asking some questions. I don't believe we received all the answers in order for us to continue with this process of advice to the executive. There are many concerns. Our colleagues from the ward division councillors referred to TRO, traffic regulation orders. That also clearly affects quality of life for residents in West Epping, very close to properties. Some genuine questions have been raised here. We do need to hear feedback from residents. This does need to be that meaningful consultation. We know some consultations from some organisations are not meaningful. They do not take on board the feedback. This is a concern. I've heard the advice there regarding the technical reasons for not a deferral. I would second Councillor Cook's recommendation if that is possible, because I do not believe we're in a position to make a decision or give that advice to the executive based on information or lack of answers in this meeting today. Thank you.
Councillor Spratt, you wish to come back?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure when you said there were technical reasons why we can't defer. I'm not sure those technical reasons were explained, but there's no reason why this committee can't ask the executive to defer their decision. So I'm quite happy to ring Councillor Hill as soon as this meeting's over and ask him to defer the decision, pending full consultation and answers to the queries that have been put forward. Now, what's the problem with that?
As far as I'm concerned, there isn't one. I'll ask Emily to come back to us and just talk about the whole issue of deferral, because it is, which I understand is because it's going to go to the board anyway. My purpose throughout all of this is to make sure that the board is made fully aware of the views of this committee, but also that the board has in full, as part of the evidence base to its consideration of the matter, all the views which have been put to us, so that every member of the board individually as well as the board collectively can take a fully informed decision. But before coming back to members, can I just ask Emily to expand on the point that she made earlier?
Yeah, so the papers have been dispatched for executive next week, and this is on the agenda for them to make the decision. So it's due to go there anyway. I think obviously the committee have got the right to recommend that they don't support the plan, and then whether they want to make any further recommendations about why, or whether they would like to make a recommendation to the executive defer it. But it is on the executive agenda for decision next week, and that's for the executive to make that decision.
I think, therefore, we need to respond to that as a matter of fact and make sure that we do get our views into the executive. But Chiara Haziano is our scrutiny officer, and she would like to make a comment.
Thank you, Chairman. Without contradicting what my colleague Emily has just stated, I would like to confirm that the Environment and Economy Scrutiny Committee may advise the executive that it does not support the recommendations and therefore make a recommendation of its own that the item is deferred, the decision is deferred until further reports are available, and the board, the committee, apologies, is satisfied that the process has been followed. Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman, and apologies earlier for interrupting you.
Not at all.
Following the information that we just had from our scrutiny officer then, I would propose that that is our recommendation because, you know, I don't want to be accused of being not towing the line, although we are scrutiny, not past political. But I would go along with that recommendation that we ask the executive for this item to be deferred to a future date and for us to reconsider it with the full information.
I'm just getting some advice. Just hang on a second, everybody. We have remotely Councillor Davey, who is, of course, on the executive, and he would like to comment on the matter. Councillor Davey.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I'm not going to comment on the substance of the debate because I've listened to all of it, and of course, as a member of the executive, I shall report the committee's comments made in this debate fully when we debate it as an executive board. I just think we need to. We've listened a lot about the concerns of residents in the Deepings, and you know, I'm always, as you know, concerned about communities and how they feel about things. However, we also have to remember, as has been said, most of you on this committee are involved in planning in some way, shape or form, either on the county council or probably at district level. This is a process, a plan-making process we have to follow. And obviously, there's been a call for sites from potential developers and applicants. We need to make sure we stay on the right side of the law in relation to the plan-making process in everything that we do. So I just want to make sure, maybe if our director or someone from legal is in the chamber, they could comment about how we manage this process going forward. I just want to reassure members, I've heard all the comments, and I will report them back into the executive formally.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. I think, in fact, we don't have a legal representative with us, but we do have a very senior officer who would like to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Carrington. The process for producing a local plan, whether it's the Waste and Minerals local plan or, as those of you that have represented districts, the local plans that the district councils produce, is, as you've stated, set out by statute. It's a very well established and, dare I say, tested process, been subject to legal challenges elsewhere in the country on a number of occasions. I would remind you that in the way this report is set out to yourselves today, the legal comments aren't indicating that there is anything in the process that we are taking forward which creates a particular risk to the authority. I hear what members are saying in terms of their concerns about whether they've got enough information upon which to actually endorse the recommendations that are in front of them, but I'm comfortable and confident that the legal process that we are engaging in is appropriate and does not create any significant additional risk from a legal perspective to the authority. What I'd also remind members of, and again, knowing that the members of this committee that have long experience of sitting on planning committees as well, is that you also need to be careful and mindful of not prejudging a consultation that hasn't yet taken place. We are seeking approval as an authority to take a document out to consultation, and at that point, all of the views, opinions of the representative bodies, individuals would be played back and would then be considered in full, and has already been clarified in this meeting this morning, would be subject to further reporting into this committee, the executive, and ultimately to council, because the adoption of the local plan is one of the policy documents that the council in its entirety has to take on board. We need to be mindful in the context of hearing local residents' views. We're also making sure we're not queering the pitch of the process that Councillor Davey has just indicated in terms of other interests who may also have legal opinions as to whether that process is being adversely affected. It's always, in planning, at least two sides to every argument, if not more, and ultimately we have to be mindful of making sure we don't step on other people's legal perspectives. I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you very much indeed for that, and I would urge the committee to bear that in mind, certainly as far as the framework of the process is concerned. As I think I mentioned at the very beginning of all of this, that is set out basically in the Planning Acts and the regulations associated with the Planning Acts, and those are being followed. Councillor Spratt, you wish to come back.
Thank you. Mr Gutherson is absolutely right. There are two sides in every legal argument. I agree with him entirely, and he's put forward a very cogent one. There is a different side of it, though, and I know I'm not a lawyer, but I would suspect there is nothing in law to prevent us from recommending to the executive that this be deferred. Like Councillor Cook has said, summer is not a good time for consultation, and I don't think there would be a problem. I'm pretty sure there wouldn't be a problem. There's nothing in law to stop this consultation, for example, starting in September. Is there?
Turn your microphone off, if you would, Hilton, because Mr Gutherson would like to come back.
As per the recommendations that are in front of you today as a committee, you are being asked to consider the attached report and determine whether you support the recommendation to the executive. I think in the context of the amendment that Councillor Cook has moved, and I think Councillor Spratt, you've indicated a willingness to second, that would be perfectly appropriate and legitimate for that to be your recommendation to the executive. Whether the executive wish to take that on board is then a matter for them to debate at next week's meeting. In that, you've clearly made representations about the information in front of you and the timing of that consultation period. Again, at this moment in time, all I would indicate is that the consultation period has been subject to dialogue and discussion with our own internal engagement team, who haven't raised any concerns about, in the context of the overall period of the consultation period, that some of that falling into the summer period is going to mean that that consultation isn't meaningful. But I hear what both you and Councillor Cook have said in the context of your concerns, but I would imagine they are matters, as I say, ultimately, if that's your recommendation, the executive would need to balance.
I think it would be a good point just to remind us of the actions which are formally before us at this point, and Mr Gutherson has alluded to them. They are: one, that we consider the report presented and to determine whether we support the recommendations to the executive as these are set out on page 17 of the report, and two, agree any additional comments to be passed to the executive in relation to this item. So I think we have to respond within the context of that. What I want to do is just make sure that we have an absolute, we've had a number of speakers who've spoken on a number of occasions, we've still got one or two who haven't spoken, just to make sure that we have been very thorough in all of this and made sure that we've got the full views of all members of the committee. Councillor Mrs Austin, I think you wish to speak, so let's turn to you.
I think it's got to the stage now where I'm seriously wondering, how can I support or recommend something that I don't know? Because we are told not all the information is in here. I can't support what I haven't been told. I can guess, but that's not the way of doing planning. I want the whole document, please.
Thank you. Can I, because I've been very quiet apart from listening to other people, I've got a couple of technical questions which I'd like to put to the officers, if I may, which may seem a retrograde step, but I think thoroughness in this matter is very important. I'd like to ask you about heritage. We heard in one of the comments that's been made, I think it may have been from Mr. Fuller, a reference to earlier comments received from Historic England, which, if I've understood him correctly, were negative. Now, I do understand that we have spoken to the County Council's own heritage team, and I think I'm right in understanding that the next stage of consultation will include going out to Historic England. Could you just background the committee on anything which Historic England may already have said, particularly about the mill?
Thank you, Chairman. Bear with me, I'm just locating some of the notes that I've got on this. We did, as part of our site assessment process, we carried out a targeted engagement with statutory consultees, including Historic England. So, as part of getting to this point, we took those comments on board, and Historic England did indeed highlight the proximity of the mill and potential impact on settings. And that is why we also referred to our colleagues in the Historic Places team to get the local expert view on that position. And the view is that, yes, there are setting impacts that need due consideration, but that these will be able to be mitigated at planning application stage.
And just for the sake of clarity, the thought that it could potentially be mitigatable at a later stage, did that come from Historic England, or was that from our own internal team?
That was from discussions with our own internal team and as part of officer judgment from the site assessment process. Historic England, to this stage, we've not gone back to them, so their comments are that their concerns at the moment that they've raised. There's no.
Okay, and Historic England would be reconsulted at a later stage
yes,
of the process.
Yes.
Thank you for that. And secondly, reference has been made to the River Welland. I've been down to the site as part of planning committee visits, or that general location, but I'm not across the details of the River Welland, and I suspect many members of the committee aren't. Has any expert advice been taken? I recognise the fact that we are, of course, ourselves the lead local flood authority, but has any expert advice been taken, or any expert consultees expressed a concern about the river itself, please?
Thank you. At this stage, we've not received any detailed comments, any objections, any concerns. We've obviously, as I've said in the presentation, we're mindful of the fact that this site was comprehensively assessed before it was allocated in the current plan. Therefore, we've not revisited everything in detail. We've looked at those elements that are changing, but this will go out to consultation, and those bodies will be able to feedback if they've got concerns. But I would add that we're allocating the sites at this stage. It's not a planning permission, so if this was to go forward as an allocation, a planning application would need to be lodged. These sorts of issues would be looked at in detail as part of the application. There are methods, tried and tested methods that mineral operators use in terms of standoffs and recharging and all those sorts of things, which at the stage that we are in terms of allocation, it's not deemed necessary to get into that level of detail. We've got enough confidence, bearing in mind the site's context already being allocated, we've got confidence that that could be addressed at the planning application stage. But notwithstanding, this will be open to consultation, and we'll take on board any comments we get from any statutory bodies in terms of the water environment.
Excellent, thank you. And just a final one, the issue of public availability of comments made so far. I don't know the answer to that one. Where people have written into, as part of the plan-making process, which this is, are those comments sort of on an evidence base or a library of evidence somewhere which is publicly accessible or not?
Yes, so one of the documents that will be published alongside the preferred approach document is the consultation statement, which will set out the responses that we received at the issues and option stage in summer 2022. It will go through the key issues and how the council's responded in terms of its proposals in the preferred approach document.
Thank you. Before I try and summarise all of that lot, are there any further members of the committee who wish to speak? I won't express any surprise. Councillor Cook and Councillor Spratt in that order.
Thank you, Chairman. It was just expanding on the comments that you made, actually, because in relation to the responses we've just heard from Mr. Leonard and Mr. McBride, In terms of what I understand it, in terms of the level 1 constraints that SG17 has, being so important, well, surely that would almost ratify it for being excluded from the plan anyway, if I'm taking what I've just heard correctly.
Well, that's a point of view. Do the officers wish to comment or not? I'm not seeing an officer coming forward, but your point is noted. Does anybody wish to respond to Councillor Cook? The answer to that is, I know. Please.
You know, the action I've taken in terms of requesting for it to be deferred is not, you know, and I've never done this at the County Council before. I just want us to fully understand as a scrutiny committee the decision that we are recommending to the executive. And I'm sorry, and I'm sorry, Dan, as well, that I don't feel comfortable at the present time to recommend that. And that's why I have put forward the amendment that I have. And I'm disappointed that I haven't got a response in terms of the level 1 as well.
That's understood. Thank you for that, Councillor Cook. Councillor Spratt.
I was going to second the amendment put forward by Councillor Cook.
Well, I don't think we're in the business of an amendment per se. I think what and I'll try and sum up, and then we'll see how we frame our response. There are proposed actions before us, and I think, as our scrutiny officer has suggested, there is a set of words which can encapsulate what we've done this morning. Right, I will now try and sum up. I think the first thing to say is where I began. This is part of a process. There is a set framework that we follow. This council is following that set framework. And we've heard advice from some very senior officers present that the framework itself, I'm not saying all the components within it, but the framework itself is lawful and is being followed properly. We can come back to the practicalities of timing, but is lawful and is being followed properly. And I'm sure, although we don't have a legal representative with us today, I know that that is going on in the background, and I'm sure that following this meeting, that will be checked and rechecked. If I can summarise a very long and very full set of comments from members of the committee fairly briefly, it seems to me that the key concerns are firstly, that the full documentation which will go out to consultation or is proposed to go out to consultation in July is not yet available, and therefore members of the committee do not feel that they have the full amount of evidence before them to make a recommendation as is drafted to support the document before us, and also that members have concerns about launching into a consultation in the summer holiday period. I have to say, as a parish councillor, I've often noted with some bemusement that these things come out at that particular time of year. That said, we also have to bear in mind, as our officers have emphasised, there is a process which has to be done here. We need to get this plan sorted out, and there is nothing statutorily which prevents consultation at that particular time of year. What we have to do, of course, is make sure that a sufficient period of time is given for any consultation and it is properly publicised. So, what I would suggest, and I turn back to Chiara here, is that we have a form of words which A, captures that, and B, makes it very clear that we would like all of the comments we have made, but also all of the evidence supplied to us, to be made available to the executive board. I think the fear of members here is that we are not that the committee is not sufficiently fully informed to make an informed decision. Clearly, the executive board will want to make sure that it is so informed should it decide that it is okay for this consultation to go forward. So a draft set of wording would be along the lines of, I move that the following consideration and debate, the committee advise the executive that we do not support the recommendations, and I would put it as they currently stand, and therefore we recommend that the executive defers the decision until those further reports which have been discussed are available. And all the rest of the comments will be captured, summarised by our officers and passed on. And I would like to be able to give an assurance to those who have submitted comments, that they will also be made available. And we actually received comments and further information even as late as this morning, which has been circulated to committee members. All of that will be made available to executive board members. And again, my concern from the chair is to make sure that the executive board is as thoroughly informed as it can be when it comes to make a decision on this matter. Colleagues, is everybody content with that form of wording as I have just read it out? I'm seeing nods. In that case, I will formally move that. Seconded by Councillor Spratt. Could all members show in favour, please? Are there any against? Any abstentions? I think that is carried. Colleagues, we've had a long and very full debate on just one item of a crowded agenda. I'm aware of other items, but I think at this point I will say that we will take a 10-minute recess and we will resume at 5 minutes to 12. Thank you very much for your participation so far. Excellent. We resume at 2 minutes to 12. Thank you very much indeed for your patience if you're listening on the live stream. And thanks everybody for a very thorough discussion in the earlier part of our agenda. We now move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the Carbon Management Plan. This is the second pre-decision report on today's agenda, and the report can be found between pages 171 and 224 of the agenda pack. The Council engaged WSP to create the fourth iteration of the Carbon Management Plan, detailing actions to lower greenhouse gas emissions from 2024 to 2030. The initiative aligns with the broader goal of achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, as outlined in the Council's Green Master Plan. And a decision on this matter will be taken by the Executive on the 4th of June 2024. The actions before us are: 1, to consider the report presented and to determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive, as these are set out on page 173 of the report. And secondly, to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive in relation to this item. And the report will be presented by Chris Miller, Head of Environment, and Dan Clayton, Sustainability Manager. Over to you, Chris and Dan. Gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As Councillor Carrington said, this is the fourth version of the Carbon Management Plan. The previous one covered the period from 2016-17 up till April 2024, and the document that WSP has produced reviews our progress over the last sort of 6-year period. We have made a significant reduction in carbon emissions over that time. A lot of that has been down to investment that the Council has made in energy efficiency measures, also from issues such as rationalisation of the estate. We've got rid of some buildings over that period, and we've invested through the public sector decarbonisation scheme and our Salix fund in energy efficiency measures around issues like street lighting. So overall, over the period, our consumption of gas has fallen by 23.5%, and our consumption of electricity has fallen by 28.5%. Over this period, the national electricity grid has decarbonised significantly as well. So when you add all those figures together, our overall emissions over that period have fallen by just under 45%. So this is in relation to greenhouse gas emissions related to building use and vehicle use. What we want to focus on much more closely in the new version of the Carbon Management Plan is the other kind of indirect greenhouse gas emissions, where the Council isn't directly in control, but we do have influence. So through outsourced services, through our contracts, through highways and adult care, and through the school estate as well. One point I wanted to highlight that the WSP plan has identified is that the significant amount of electricity that the Council uses, 38.7 million kilowatt hours of electricity was our consumption in 2016-17. We reduced that to 27.7 million kilowatt hours of electricity in the latest year of 22-23. So that there's a big financial kind of saving that we've made through reducing that consumption. There's also a kind of risk management element to it as well. So whereas previously when we were on 38 million kilowatt hours, if the prices had increased, so when Russia invaded Ukraine, there was a 20 pence jump in electricity prices. We've knocked 11 million kilowatt hours off our consumption. So that equates to about £5.5 million that we would have had to find if we hadn't done those sort of reductions. It's made a significant financial saving, the work that we've done over the last 6 years. So the new plan sets out a series of objectives up to 2030 with a target for a further 25% cut from where we already are. So I think we've done the kind of low-hanging fruit, simple options so far. So the next round of cuts will involve kind of greater interventions into buildings operation of services. I think there still are some opportunities in some of our buildings to get significant carbon reductions. As I said before, we're also going to move our focus onto these indirect scope 3 emissions that are related to things like procurement activity. We also want to broaden out the carbon management plan. I think it's been very much kind of property and transport focused in the first 3 versions. We want to embed this right across the council, making sure that in each of the directorates there's a focus on how you can reduce carbon emissions, and it strongly links to the council's new values process with the eco-conscious value that's included in there. So yeah, so that's an overview of the report that was produced by WSP. So I'll stop there.
Thank you very much indeed, Dan. Chris, do you want to add anything at this stage? In that case, we open the floor to members. Any questions, any comments? The Vice Chairman, Councillor Griggs.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was a really clear report. I've got a couple of points on some of the points in there, and I admit a lot of them aren't in our direct control, but I hope for some feedback where possible. So, energy savings, it looks good on the face of it, but obviously we know that COVID encouraged working from home. And forgive me if it's in the report. Does that include the energy use from employees now working at home? And I appreciate that that's hard to calculate because some houses would have still had energy consumption anyway, but obviously that's still going to increase the energy consumption of those who may have people at home. So that's my first point.
It doesn't at the moment. So each year we're producing a greenhouse gas emissions report for the council. So we've done 2 versions of them, and I think on the timeline for the future round of these committees, we will be bringing one back in October for the 23-24 data. As part of the emissions figures that DEFRA and the Department for Energy Security and Net Zero produce each year, they've got a new methodology for calculating working from home emissions. So there are about 6 or 7 different methodologies that I've seen of different ways of calculating working from home, and it's a bit of a finger in the air. I'd say it's a plus or minus 50% because there's so many variables in there. But we will be adding that working from home calculation into the next version of the report, so that will be in the 23-24 report.
Lovely, thank you very much. Again, it's really good to have a very aspirational, or what I feel is an aspirational document. But obviously in Lincolnshire we know we're faced with many challenges. So I saw the government's target of having 50% of travel around towns by public transport or by foot. I mean, I'm sure I remember in full council not very long ago people were discussing the fact that parts of their divisions or their entire division aren't on public transport routes. I know in Boston public transport is extremely poor. For instance, getting to Lincoln, good luck with that at any point, especially directly. And obviously the government has made strides such as the capped bus fare, but I know that one of our biggest operators in Boston aren't subscribed to that. So I'm not sure what we can do there. Again, it mentioned alternative fuels, but again, rurality in our long road network means, you know, depending on the range of those and the infrastructure in place, and we all know the grid in Lincolnshire isn't potentially as good as it need to be, so that raises some concerns. And the last thing is lighting of a state, and I appreciate not all of it's in control, but I know, for instance, the school next to my house, the lights are on until 8 p.m, and often the site's not open past sort of 6 by the time the teachers leave. And I appreciate they're not under our direct control, but obviously if we're pushing any of our stakeholders to be as environmentally friendly as we are, is there anything more we could do to encourage both our estate and those we liaise with strongly to take mitigating actions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. On the schools issue, the Department for Education published a new strategy for net zero for the whole of the education sector that came out, I think it was about 18 months ago. As part of that, schools have got to put in place a carbon reduction plan, and they have to have a champion from within the staff to focus on that. So I think there's going to be more focus as they develop and implement those plans over the coming years. And then from the development fund money that we were granted from the underspend this year, we've got a project in there to work with schools. So we'll be starting that off in the kind of next few months to kind of focus on what our local schools can do to reduce their emissions. And I still think there's a lot of estates-related ones. There's also, moving into the wider Green Master Plan, things around biodiversity that they can get engaged in with the school grounds as well. So I think we'll be working, trying to work more closely with them going forward. On the transport side of things, when you look at the emissions right across the whole economy in the county, transport is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Lincolnshire. When you look at other areas of the country, it isn't, and it is our rurality that causes that. I think other parts of the Police Directorate are working on electric vehicle charging points on streets that are coming forward. I know there's a lot of work on public transport, and I've been to one of the Towns Fund boards in Spalding, and I know that the other Towns Fund areas are focusing on some of these transport issues as part of the funding that they've been allocated as well. So there is kind of work going on in these areas on those issues.
Councillor Bowles, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, my first question was on the point of schools that you just sort of covered. I guess my question is part of this process going to be able to support schools in terms of bigger projects? For, the primary school I'm a governor at, the whole environmental plan and carbon reduction is out the window, literally, because the windows are rattling and, it's just the heating's on full bore all year because it's that cold for the kids. So is there going to be that support in terms of those bigger grant funding projects to make the schools fit for purpose, so that they are able to do some of this work? Because otherwise it's just a non-starter for them. And then my second question is around the our fleet sort of thing. Now I get what we're doing internally for that. What are we doing to manage our contractors, suppliers? What mechanisms have we got in place to ensure that they are implementing the same measures, the same things that we're looking to do? How are we doing that through the procurement, and how are we monitoring that, ongoing during the contracts to make sure they are hitting any targets that we do set, that kind of thing? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So on the schools, there's the public sector decarbonisation scheme that offers some large-scale grants to do that kind of funding. It's aimed at decarbonisation of heating within buildings. So there are opportunities for schools to bid into that. As part of the development work for this, we did a heat decarbonisation plan for our council-run estate. I think I've been discussing with colleagues in property about putting a second bid into that fund to do a similar study for our schools estate. So it will look at the buildings, and it makes a series of recommendations on what can be done to upgrade them in terms of energy efficiency. So I think then it's a case of once that work's been done, of then putting bids into the public sector decarbonisation scheme, and usually they have a kind of rolling programme of bidding being open. So we were successful in a round previously where we got the funding to do the heat decarbonisation plan. So I think we'd look to work with property colleagues too to support schools to do that. So I think there is funding there. It's just getting access to it. And then on the contractors, I think a lot of our contractors are maybe a bit ahead of us in terms of electric vehicles and alternative fuels that they're using for some of their on-site equipment. What we have done, I've been working with some of the procurement team, and we've produced a set of guidelines to put into major contracts for a series of questions to be asked. So they are now written, and I think they've gone through the approval process, so they're ready to be fed into major contracts that come up.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for, Chair. Just for some context, in my day job, that's what I do in construction, auditing how companies audit their suppliers on quality, environmental, health and safety. So that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, that we are having those in the contracts and then the checks going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I'll chip one or two in myself, if I may. In the report, you talk about emerging technologies, some of which are not yet necessarily mature enough for us to include in our own procurement programme at scale. I wonder if you could expand a little bit for the committee about what kind of technologies you're thinking of and when you think they might actually be of a maturity whereby they can make a significant impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Air source heat pumps are an obvious one where it's becoming more common to have large buildings heated by them. So we've got a couple of examples in the county. We've got a secondary school that's heated by air source heat pump, I think at North Thoresby. I know that North Links Council have just completed some buildings where they've got external air source heat pumps. I think one of the challenges for us has been when we've done energy efficiency projects in the past, they've always delivered a reduction in running costs. It's not necessarily the case that that will be true with air source heat pumps. So with the price differential, I think we're getting quotes of about 18 pence kilowatt hour for electricity at the moment, and gas is coming in at about 3.5, 4 pence a kilowatt hour. So you know it's sort of 3, 4, 5 times cheaper to run things on gas. So you've got to get that higher level of efficiency from your air source heat pump. We've also been approached by a private company that's looking to develop a heat network in the centre of Lincoln, so we could be a potential off-taker of that. I know they've been looking at potential sites. They've potentially been looking at 2 networks around the city, one north of the Brayford and one south of the Brayford, so we could become an off-taker of that. So and I think there was talk about looking at hydrogen options for heating. I think the government have kind of moved away from that. There was planned for a hydrogen town that was due to start later this year, but I think they announced a few weeks ago that was going to be delayed, so I don't think that's going to go ahead immediately. But yeah, there are lots of potential technologies there. It's I think it's getting the right ones, and it's this focus on can we do it and still reduce running costs as well.
Thank you for that. And the final one from me. We are talking obviously about our own operations, but like any other council, we're looking at a we're looking to reduce carbon emissions across the county, and that involves working with other partners. I know the challenges of that being a dual-hatted member at the district level. At the county level, who are we talking with? Who are we seeking to influence, and how are we seeking to influence them, please?
Well, we are working sort of closely with our district colleagues. So I think as mentioned before, transport that is our largest area of carbon emissions in the county. The other 2 main ones are domestic housing and agriculture. So on domestic housing, we're working with the district councils on the local energy area demonstrator programme, where advisors are going out and working with residents to identify how they can access funding to make their homes more energy efficient. So that there's a project with the South and East Lincolnshire Partnership, and then there's a project with the councils on the western side of the county that the county council is working closely with. We're also working with the NHS colleagues from there, so we're developing that will probably bring to this committee later in the year a climate adaptation programme for how we deal with the effects of climate change, and the NHS are a key part of that. I think there are also going to be representatives from the police at that event, where we're looking at how those issues come forward. And then we're also with the agriculture work that was mentioned right back at the start of the meeting. I think climate change is a key part of that. So we're looking at how the agriculture sector can reduce their emissions as well, and we've got a couple of projects lined up to get underway in the next few months to start tackling those issues. So.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I'm looking around the room to see if any other members have any questions or comments, and I am seeing none. So can I thank you? I beg your pardon? Oh, I beg your pardon. Sorry, Councillor Taylor, I didn't see you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did indicate some moments ago some comments have been covered in the answers since the report. I do welcome that, and thank you for the report. And just a few brief comments. The Vice Chairman referred to the £2 cap on public transport on some buses, but that exists. That is shown some results in some areas where there's an option. I know at the last full council, the cabinet member for transport also and highways also expressed his desire for this to continue and to lobby that to the government or next government. So hopefully we could also press that point, because we are seeing some shift there in transport movements where there is that option. Also regarding electric vehicles and charging points, we know that move towards electric vehicles did stall a bit over the past year or so, of course with the increase in utility prices. We're well aware of that, but there's been some reductions this year, and that has been welcomed. And we know there's been some movement, particularly in towns, urban areas, for those charging points. However, there seems to be some gaps in some villages, and we know there's work to be carried out there, as we know the often in our most remote areas the vehicle is not a luxury, it is a necessity, and there's a cost from driving from that village to the nearest fuel station. So some infrastructure where there's not the opportunity to have them installed on private driveways or private properties, I think there's still some gaps there to encourage that movement or that choice. So absolutely, we have reduced carbon, saved money. Just a comment on the street lighting reduction. Of course, that has saved money, that has reduced street lighting. It was a shock and a surprise for some people when that was implemented. Was it 2016, a few years ago now? It doesn't take place in some areas. I know it has saved money. We have in the report the section 17 obligations regarding Crime and Disorder Act. So we do need to be aware of that. There are vulnerable people out there, those who work shifts who are still concerned about that. We don't feel it this time of year in May and June in the summer, but in middle of winter that does affect certain residents. So I would also urge us not to go further with that. Let's not look at 10 p.m. or even further in the mornings there. Let's do consider, again, quality of life issues. Should not go at a cost of reducing the carbon and saving money. So do be aware that let's not go any further on that. Just a few comments on those points in the report. Thank you.
Do you wish to come back on that, Dan? In that case, thank you very much for that. So I've started with Mr. Councillor Taylor. we have a portfolio holder. I'm missing everybody today. I need to get new glasses, I think.
It just whether we, I mean, I think it was a couple of years ago now, North Somercotes Parish Council went into the Zero Carbon Parishes project, and it was an excellent thing. You know, they looked at the carbon emissions of the parish. We got grant funding. I think it was used on the football field and the pavilion and stuff like that. It saved money. It made the parish council put some money into that project as well. Is that still going ahead? I mean, it is a really good thing to lower carbon emissions and stuff and help local communities.
Yes, I'm pleased to say we, as part of the development fund money, we've got a new round of funding to do, a new round of zero carbon parishes. So that's something for members to bear in mind, that if there is a local parish council that wants to work with us, then we'd be happy to have their details and look at the projects that we could do. So we've done things like LED lighting in village halls, we've done tree planting, we've done some, I think in Hainton we did some cycle storage there. So there's a whole range of environmental projects that we've done from that funding.
Yeah, I'd very strongly endorse the point that you make and your response there, Dan. Harington, in my patch, was one of the pilots in zero carbon parishes, and they took to it with huge enthusiasm, and that is still a regular item on their agenda. I think it's one of those things that where you can establish a habit, and it's all about practical application. And I think the interesting thing about this report and discussion today, it just emphasises that simply declaring a climate emergency or waving a protest banner or throwing some orange paint don't cut it. That makes absolutely no difference at all. What matters is practical implementation, sound science, maths, good engineering, and it's got to be said, accountancy, working out how all of this will be funded without breaking the bank and making sure that the costs are both met and are proportionate is very important indeed. So this is an ongoing piece of work, and this is just a slice in time. But thank you very much indeed for that report. If there are no further comments from the Chamber, hopefully I haven't missed anybody this time, we have before us a suggested proposal, which is, one, that I move that the Board supports the recommendation to the Executive detailed on page 173 of the report, and two, that I ask our comments, as these have been captured by Chiara Hadzianu, our Scrutiny Officer, be shared with the Executive ahead of its consideration timeline. Do I have a seconder for that? The Vice Chairman, thank you. We will now vote. All those in favour, please show. Are there any against? Any abstentions? That is carried. That is carried. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. We now move to item 7 on the agenda, Waste Transfer Station Improvements Food Waste Project. The final pre-decision report on today's agenda, this can be found between pages 225 and 238 of your agenda pack. DEFRA has announced the, and I put it in quote marks, Simpler Recycling Initiative, mandating weekly food waste collections by all local authorities by April of 2026, which may sound a long way away, but it isn't. To support this, £9.6 million in capital funding is required for Lincolnshire County Council to facilitate food waste collection by its district partners. This funding will be used to purchase land, construct a new waste transfer station, modify existing stations, and purchase a wheeled loading shovel. Transitioning food waste from incineration at the energy from waste facilities to anaerobic digestion, the new technology, will enhance the Council's recycling rate, projected to improve by 7%. This change aligns with the waste hierarchy, as anaerobic digestion is considered to be recycling, thereby significantly boosting the Council's overall recycling performance, as measured by the Recycling Rate Corporate Key Performance Indicator. And a decision on this matter will be taken by the Executive Councillor for Waste and Trading Standards and the Leader of the Council, the Executive Councillor for Resources, Communications and Commissioning, between the 3rd and the 7th of June 2024. The actions before us this morning, the actions before us this afternoon are to consider the report presented and to determine whether we support the recommendations to the Executive Councillors, as these are set out on pages 227 to 228 of the report, and to agree any additional comments to be passed on to the Executive Councillors in relation to this item. And the report is going to be delivered to us jointly by Chris Yorston, who's Head of Waste, and we also have with us Rachel Stamp, the Waste Partnerships Project Manager. Chris, I think you're going to introduce the item, so over to you.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Thank you very much. Okay, so overview of the food waste project. So in October 2023, DEFRA released Simpler Recycling, and this has detailed the changes required by all local authorities under the Environment Act, and this has included the mandatory weekly collections of food waste starting from April 2026. So our current position is that food waste is currently mixed in with your residual mix, and this is sent to the Energy for Waste facility in North Hykeham, which is energy recovery. DEFRA have confirmed in Simpler Recycling, the Environment Act, that anaerobic digestion is the preferred disposal route for food waste treatment. Anaerobic digestion has been classed as recycling by DEFRA, so this will move the waste that's currently in our residual mix, which is being sent for recovery, into recycling. So Lincolnshire, we have about 30 to 35,000 tonnes of food waste in our residual mix, and this equates to 7% of our overall waste volumes. So moving this from anaerobic digestion to anaerobic digestion would increase our recycling rates. Currently, we're around 41%. That would bring us up to about 48%, and that moves us much closer to our target KPI, which is set at 50%. So there's also a cost benefit to anaerobic digestion. Processing waste with the Energy from Waste facility is around £90 a tonne. However, anaerobic digestion is around about £0 a tonne currently, and that's remained consistent for a number of years. However, to accept the food waste at our current infrastructure, we're going to have to modify our 5 existing waste transfer stations. Plus, there'll also be a requirement to build a new one in the Lincoln area. So this will enable our district council partners to drop off collections efficiently within or as close to their district boundary as possible. So the infrastructure required to accept food waste at our existing transfer stations, we're going to need new retaining walls, internal drainage systems, external sealed tanks for any fluids collected, odour suppression systems because we're concentrating food waste into one pile, fire suppression systems and detection system modifications, and washdown facilities. The new waste transfer facility in Lincoln would also require those infrastructure changes. LCC do currently have a facility which we rent at South Highcombe at the minute, which accepts the City of Lincoln's waste and some of Norca Stevens, but this is a very small operation currently, which is just accepting a bit of the mixed dry recycling. It doesn't have the capacity, it's too small, and doesn't have the infrastructure to accept food waste. So the capital funding required, it's broken down, so there's £5.4 million identified for a new waste transfer station, £4 million to modify the existing transfer stations. There's £200,000 for a new loading shovel, which will go at the new facility, so that totals £9.6 million. In the previous years, the energy from waste is generated from windfall energy sales because of the Ukraine conflict. We've secured £6.1 million of additional funding, which has been capitalised by finance and set aside for this project. So we need £3.6 million is the additional ask. There is new burdens funding, but this has been released by DEFRA, but this has only been given to the waste collection authorities. So our principle is an investor save basis for this project. So the estimated revenue savings to switch from EFW to anaerobic digestion is circa £3 million per annum. We've got other savings from not renting the existing transfer station at South Highcombe, and there's the potential increase of headspace at the energy from waste because we're taking that material out. So we'll have the capacity to sell this to the commercial sector, and LCC have a profit share agreement with the contractor that runs that, so we may be able to present additional income through that. There will be revenue implications for the new transfer station, which is estimated at £390,000 per year. So the overall estimated annual revenue savings are £3.6 million per year. So that will pay back the additional capital ask of the £3.6 million within 1 year. The consequence of not delivering the project is that the waste collection authorities will have to tip out of district, and LCC become liable for the tipping away payments required. So the WCAs will have to buy more vehicles, hire more staff than their new burdens funding currently allows. Also, the direct delivery from the waste collection authorities to a single or a couple of AD plants stretched across the county is not efficient. So typically, delivering locally at one of our transfer stations can lead to a vehicle undertaking 2 to 3 rounds a day. If they have to travel across county, it may be only 1 delivery a day. So it's not an efficient method of transporting direct to an anaerobic digestion facility. So the current programme for infrastructure delivery is that we'd like to make the existing transfer station modifications throughout 2025. And for the Lincoln transfer station, ideally we'll have an agreement on a parcel of land by the end of this year. Planning application submitted in early 2025 with a construction start towards the end of 2025 and becoming operational in mid-2026. That's everything. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed for that. Rachel, is there anything you wish to add at this point? No. In that case, the floor is open to members for comments and questions, please. Councillor Bowles.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, could you just clarify, Chris, on what you just said about it not being economical in terms of direct delivery to the AD plants? I'm thinking, as with my West Lindsey hat on, yeah, obviously there's an AD plant at Hemswell that ideally in my head you would think West Lindsey would just deliver direct to that. Are you saying that's not? Because I can't imagine if they're doing the collection rounds out Market Raisin Way to come to the station in my division in Gainsborough to drop that off to then have to other collections to then go to the AD plant. I know it's a bigger picture than just West Lindsey, but I'm just in my head, I would assume that we'd like to get to a point in West Lindsey where they can just direct deliver to the AD plant, and it would sort of minimise that travel backwards and forwards to the station. Secondly, in terms of the station, obviously, like I say, it's in my division. I'm just looking for some reassurances of work you are going to do there. Can we take some real good look at the drainage there? Because that was one of the big issues when the station was initially built. So there's some concern locally that if we're looking at food waste being there, that's obviously going to have a lot of discharge potentially. So really looking at the waste. And more generally, can we just have a look at that site? It's an absolute eyesore, considering it's something that's not very old. It's on the main road driving through Gainsborough, or around Gainsborough, I should say, on the sort of bypass. And it's mucky, it's horrible. There's clearly a lot of discharge going on the building, and it's just mucky stains all over it, and it's complete eyesore. So slight left field, but if you're going to be doing work on the station, I would hope we can make it look a bit better than it does and not quite as embarrassing with the LCC logo on there, stained and dirty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, some excellent points there. So yeah, with the West Lindsey issue, we are aware that there is a anaerobic digestion facility in the county. We're currently out for procurement for anaerobic digestion facility capacity at the minute. So that may change our plan slightly in the future, but that will be dependent on where the locations are. But the principle will be the same, that we want to provide every district council location as close or near to their boundaries. So we're trying to optimise the efficiency for each of our district partners, and we're working with them together where their tipping locations are going to be located. With the drainage situation, the plan is it will all be internal to the existing building at the minute, so there won't be any additional impermeable areas for rainfall to be captured. We'll make sure that it's going to be a sealed drainage system, so any fluids that are captured from the food waste will go into a segregated tank, and then they will then get pumped away, and they'll get taken by the anaerobic digestion facility, because it's good quality material that they want to take and process. And then your point about the transfer station being mucky, I'll get that investigated and follow that up for you, and I'll respond to you in due course. Thank you.
Councillor Mrs Austin.
Thank you, Chairman. Has there been any analysis into the source of food waste? I mean, I deplore food waste, and I've seen in my travels from time to time, well, I know people buy far more than they want, and then they waste most of it. Can this be coupled with public education if it is domestic food waste? If it's on a, I don't know, is some of it related to the processing of food? I'm very close, my patch includes the Marsh Lane Industrial Estate, where food is processed. It's sort of halfway through the food valley, if you like. And again, is that where food waste is coming on? I want to know, where is food being wasted and why is it being wasted? Obviously, if it's meat, you've got to get rid of bones, that sort of thing. But I just would like to know more. I mean, it's just this principle that I don't like wasting food. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. We undertake quite regular analysis of the waste that's presented to us, and that the 30 to 35,000 tonne that's been identified has been shaped through that. So that is currently what householders are throwing away into their residual mix. As we progress through the project, there's quite a lot of engagement and community information that needs to be provided out there to educate people, because ultimately this is moving this waste up the waste hierarchy from recovery to recycling. But what we would ultimately like to see is waste minimisation. So informing people, not to throw this food waste out, or to not buy it in the first place has got to be the more important point. and that's something we'll be presenting. We've got a team that go around to schools, go to community groups, and we talk about the waste hierarchy to different parties, and this will be one of the messages that we'll be pushing, is the waste minimisation to prevent it coming as food waste in the first place. Thank you.
Councillor Griggs.
Yeah, it's just a short point from me. Yeah, I can't disagree with the scheme or the report in front of us. I do generally disagree with food waste collection, and part of the reason is, for anyone who remembers when we rolled out the paper collection, yeah, if you represent a more metropolitan area of our rural county and everyone's got a terraced house, trying to find storage for different waste streams is really difficult. I know I live just in a normal 3-bed semi, and I've currently got like 4 bins in my kitchen, to which there's no room really for those 4, let alone a different one. Just as a sort of flippant point on Councillor Austin's point, I generally go shopping on a Monday, and I've noticed over the last couple of years the amount of times you go to buy fresh food and go, oh, it's got 2 days left on it. It'd be interesting to see how much of the waste streams made by people going, I've gone to do a weekly shop, or half my shopping's gone off. Because I tend to find more and more in every shop, not just big supermarkets. You look and you're lucky to get a couple of days off it. And I know the supermarkets argue people like to go shopping multiple times a week, but I would argue that's out of necessity more than because that's their preferred shopping method.
Completely agree with what you're saying, and I think it's about not knowing what we don't know yet. So we're just in the process of doing some work with our partners in the districts and also with our communications team to do a little bit of engagement and focus group work and trials with people to understand their shopping habits, what our messaging needs to be, where the waste is coming from, what behaviours we need to look at challenging, and then also then do we need to work with the shops and the manufacturers around these sort of things, because you're quite right, we could be in danger of assuming everybody does a weekly shop, or everybody who lives in a town calls at the local shop on the way home, but we need to understand what that demographic looks like and address that in a smart way, and not just take a blanket approach to it. So I completely agree, and we don't yet know what we don't know, so we are looking at that, Councillor Griggs, and we'll be driving that forward in our own communications and engagement campaign.
Councillor Hayes, please.
Thank you, Chairman. 2 questions, if I may, Chris. First one is, I don't understand these systems terribly well. So my first question is, what happens to the liquid? And my second question is, we've got an anaerobic digestion system at Holdingham, near Sleaford, and at the moment it uses produce from farms. Does this mean that we can, and it's a private company so it's up to them, but does it mean that at presently the fields that grow crops for anaerobic digesters, will they take food, and so that we can produce more food stocks for ourselves in Lincolnshire?
Thank you, Councillor. So the way anaerobic digestion works is that the food waste is presented at the facility. There's a debagging area that takes out any plastic contamination. It then goes into these vessels where the microbes work. It's effectively a bit like a cow's stomach, where the material is churned around and the gases and the fuels are taken off from that. So that is one part of the mix that you can then use that as energy or a biofuel. And then the second part is that sort of the more solid and liquid base is turned into a digestate, which is used for fertiliser on farmland. And then the second point is that there's 2 types of anaerobic digestion facilities. The ones that are licensed currently for sort of farm and agricultural waste, and then there's the ones that are able to take household waste, and they're licensed in different ways, and you have to have different equipment and there's different regulations that you have to follow to accept that material. So obviously the ones that we're going out to at procurement is that they can accept household waste at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for that. I think you'll have gathered from members' comments, and I hope we'd all agree that education in this matter is going to be extremely important. There's always someone who pops up whenever we introduce a new coloured bin. Purple lidded bins have been the most recent ones, which have gone out district by district. And there is the classic thing of somebody who appears in social media and the local newspaper who will say, I won't do this because it won't work. We had this in North Kesteven, and that particular individual has just popped up in Boston, I think, who've just gone for it. Certainly in North Kesteven, that particular stream, paper and card, is more than 99% pure, and it is one of the most pure streams that actually goes into the paper mill down near King's Lynn. It can be done, but food waste is going to be more complicated. As a member has observed, there's now, well, as the Vice Chairman observed, there is now quite a few bins. This will mean more containers of some sort. It's another level of education. It's another level of practice. It's going to be a tougher one, so I very much applaud the work that's already going on with our partners, the waste collection authorities, to make sure that we understand the way the public will approach this, because that is going to be critical to the success of the matter. And for investing all this money in, we need to make sure that we get a robust waste stream which can generate some revenue coming back. So if there are no further comments or questions from the floor, and I don't think there are, I will move us forward to the proposal, which is I move the board supports the recommendation to the Executive Council as detailed on page 227 of the report, and I ask for our comments, as these have been captured by Chiara Haziano, our scrutiny officer, to be shared with the Executive Councillors, one of whom, of course, we have present today, ahead of their consideration timeline. Is that seconded? Seconded by the Vice Chairman. We will now take a vote. All those in favour, please show. Anyone against? Any abstentions? That is carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. We now move to item 8 on the agenda, LCC Business Centres and Economic Development Portfolio Performance Report. This scrutiny report can be found on pages 239 to 244 of the agenda pack. The purpose of this paper is to provide the committee with a summary of the performance of the Council's portfolio of business centres and industrial units, including occupancy levels and tenant feedback on the suitability of our premises in meeting the needs of small businesses. And the actions before us today are: we're invited, 1, to consider the contents of the report and comment on the appropriateness of the measures used to review the performance of the Council's portfolio of business premises, and 2, to consider whether the structured interview format provides more reliable feedback to gauge the success of the portfolio and whether members support the work of officers to undertake further tenant engagement and support activities. And this report will be presented by one of the most patient people in the County Council, Mr. Simon Wright. Thank you very much for, I think, probably anticipated you presenting the report a little bit before this time of the clock. So Simon is the Regeneration and Portfolio Manager. We'll take questions after the briefing. Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Carrington, and I appreciate the members today. I've had a very busy morning, so I'll be as brief and succinct as I can. I won't go through the paper in detail. As you reminded me at the beginning of the meeting, the paper's been circulated previously. But what I would like to do is pull out a small number of, which I think are particularly salient points from that paper, just to highlight some important principles. In particular, the first one is really that our team of portfolio officers who manage our estate continue to do so in a very proactive way. And that's across our whole of estate of offices and industrial units, which are spread out across the county. We also are very mindful of our lettings policy, which has been before this committee before, and it remains a really useful resource to guide our decision making and recommendations on how our portfolio be managed. Since January, my team have been undertaking a raft of structured interviews with our tenants to gain valuable feedback on a range of topics, very much following a similar theme to last year's interviews, so that we do hopefully now have a strong baseline to measure performance year on year. What I would like to stress in my interpretation of the results is that overwhelmingly our tenants do continue to show a high degree of satisfaction with their business space and the services that we provide. There are some room for improvements, which I'll come on to, but generally speaking, there is a high degree of satisfaction. It was also notable this year that some tenants did indicate the fact that they are considering either upsizing or downsizing from their current space. And I think what that does, members, is very much highlight one of the main strengths of our portfolio and what we offer our tenants, and that is all of our leases, all of our tenants are given a rolling break for the very reason that if they want to upsize to more premises and expand their business, we will not act as a barrier for them to do so. In fact, we obviously would support them and do all we can to encourage them. One of the ways is that we do that is by just allowing them to return their keys to us and break their lease at very short notice. And that is a very unique feature of our portfolio, which one that we are very proud of. Our further responses demonstrate that there are a number of positive attributes to our premises, including their location, their cleanliness, and the fact that we have very helpful and approachable professional staff manning our business centres in particular. There is also a high level of satisfaction, or a consistent level of satisfaction, I should say, with the rental levels that we charge. In fact, there's been very little movement over that response rate from last year, which I hope is encouraging. In the interest of balance, I did mention that there are areas of improvement, and we did get some feedback from tenants suggesting that improvements could be made in the premises. For example, there was some noise noted from across offices and the age-old problem of lack of car parking. And my response to those feedback was, whilst we are listening and will do all we can to mitigate those, a lot of the feedback seems to be very much a behavioural one rather than something that we can physically change the building, or there is so we can work with our tenants to educate them and encourage them to be mindful and respectful of their neighbours. What it also does, I think, where there has been one or two physical suggestions that we need to tidy up premises, it does reinforce the need for the council to continue to invest in its portfolio and to implement its planned preventative maintenance strategy, which the team are developing at the moment. Finally, I'd also like to just mention a very strong theme that came out when I was before you last year and again this year, and that is about tenant support and engagement. And we have a number of new members of the team this year, and we are very much focused on how we can support and engage with our tenants even more fully. And I think a really good example of that would be that on the 18th of June at the Market Deeping Business Centre Aventus, we are holding a tenant engagement breakfast seminar where we've invited a range of speakers to come and talk to our tenants. I think I'm right in saying that that's the first time we've done anything of that nature and of that magnitude, very much using it as a test bed, and if it's as successful as we hope it will be, then our intention is to hold a second event in the later on in the year, but focusing in the north of the county, probably at Mercury House in Gainsborough, recognising that people, our tenants, do run very busy lives, busy businesses, and their time is at a premium. So we will travel to them to provide that level of those services. So in summary, the structured interview approach, I do believe, has allowed for us to have a very informative discussion with our tenants. The feedback has been very similar to last year, and it does suggest that our portfolio is managing to hold its own at the present time. Looking ahead for the remainder of the year, that increased emphasis on tenant engagement will be a major focus for everybody. We're very much as well working towards that business engagement event, which I've mentioned, and looking to roll that out across the county. So just a key summary from the paper, Chairman, which I've hoped to have helped members this morning. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll start with the Vice Chairman, Councillor Griggs.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to read this report. I think it's a really useful service we offer businesses. And I spoke about that when the lease report came, so I won't go over that again. I just have a couple of questions. unfortunately, there's lies, damn lies, and statistics. And I think, 14% of people say this, and there's 5 respondents. Is that representative of the whole of the feeling of the tenants? I'd imagine it is, to be fair, but what assurances do we have that actually that is representative? The only other thing I have a slight concern over is the occupancy levels table on page 241. The number of tenants in the quarter 4 22 to 23 is 147. My maths makes it 145. And I appreciate that that's rather pedantic, but it's the same number in the next year's figures, even though that number is 147. And I didn't know whether that was a typo or whether we're missing potential numbers out of that table. And then I have a question that arrives from that. The 3% reduction in industrial occupancy by floor area, is that just as a result of natural churn? Or I know our leases go up by, I think it was RPI mentioned in the report, which we know last year was extremely high, so I didn't know whether that forced people out of the potential market. And what sort of waiting lists do we have, if any? Are we providing all the particular spaces that is required by the market? Is there large amounts more we could do in different areas? So like I said, I think it's a really crucial service that the county support businesses finding their feet, moving from being someone's garage one-man band up to functioning businesses that employ people across the county. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Griggs. I'll try and unpick the key questions there. The first one is in terms of the industrial occupancy and the 3% differentiation. I think I would put that down to general churn. I don't think it's significant of any other major factor at this time. As I say, there is the satisfaction at our rental levels is consistent. So I know that it's not because our rents have suddenly increased, which would be a major deterrent. I think it's just the general churn in the market. Well, I'll certainly double check those numbers when I get back to the office, but what I would say is it is quite a dynamic portfolio, so the numbers do fluctuate because we're always changing the area of space. For example, our business centres, a lot of the internal walls are demountable, so if a tenant wants to expand, we create space as much as we can. So it does tend to sort of show a change each year, but there are reasons for that in terms of how we are accommodating growing businesses or trying to release more business space if we're not maximising the space. So that would account for that. Forgive me, was there any other question?
Yeah, it was in terms of do we have anyone on waiting lists that we can't accommodate and what future capacity may be needed?
Yeah, thank you for reminding me. No, we don't really have much of a waiting list. Before COVID, we did always have a waiting list at Market Deeping, which was always our most popular centre. But we are managed to accommodate all interest as it comes. Our industrials sometimes can be on the market for a month or two before we find occupiers. Yeah, we don't have a waiting list at the moment.
Councillor Spratt, please.
Am I allowed to speak again, Chairman? Can I thank you for the report, Simon? Particularly interested in the County Council's role as a facilitating body in terms of economic development and such like. And I know I got into trouble at a meeting previously, but talking about being an economic interventionist. And I think that the role of the council, so comments rather than questions, if I may, Chairman. And I think that if we get devolved powers after the general election, whoever wins, I'm hoping that devolved powers will lead to more activity to build on the success that we've got in local authority economic development. I notice that in terms of expenditure and income, the expenditure is higher than the income that comes in. Shall we keep that a secret? If that goes any further, blimey. But I also note in the 5th paragraph on page 242 that we do review rents, of course, but we try and keep them less than market level, or perhaps not less, in response to market levels, so that it doesn't disadvantage our traders, for example, compared with elsewhere. And when everything else is going up, isn't it? Let's face it, Chairman, the fact that small businesses, medium-sized businesses, and some larger businesses who have premises from us, at least there's a little bit of slack there for them to encourage development and prosperity and economic growth generally. So a few comments, Chairman, rather than questions. Thank you.
I have to say, Hilton, you've just raised 2 points that I was going to raise, but far more eloquently than I would, and I absolutely agree with you. The point about the money, by the way, is one that I think we do need to keep an eye on. I know that some district councils run similar operations and do not run them at a cost. Now, the cost is not small, and I think the benefits are, the cost is small, a few hundreds of thousands, and I think the benefits are very much outweigh the cost. But it would be good to try and get this revenue neutral as quickly as possible. But I absolutely endorse Hilton's point. People often think there's this great gulf between local government and the private sector, and there isn't. Local government and indeed national government has a great role, to use your word, Hilton, as a facilitator. And that's something we do and we do very well. Particularly when you look at the balance of business in our county, which is heavily swayed toward small businesses, SMEs, and indeed micro businesses, providing them with a place to start, and often also through our economic development team, some guidance and help and advice is absolutely key. You can't grow a garden without actually planting seeds, and that means you've got to have a fertile bed in which to plant them. These kind of facilities provide such a place where companies can establish, where companies can develop, where they can grow, and that adds to the prosperity of our county. Given our geographical mix of being somewhat isolated in parts of the county and also partly rural, having a good spread of these distributed across Lincolnshire is extremely important. So I'm sure the committee would join me in commending the work that is done by this team, and we look forward to your next report. Do we have any other questions or comments from members in the chamber? I'm seeing none. In that case,
Thank you, Chairman.
Again, I missed the portfolio holder, who is way outside my eye line. My apologies. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's a bit of a random one. But in terms of, have we got any sort of evidence or any data or knowledge of have we got the right centres and industrial units, and is there, are we offering something as well as the general business sort of community, or is there a gap somewhere? Because I mean, I saw a programme this morning, and there was some, I think it was at Manchester, and they've got these 20-foot containers where they'd set up sort of little, sewing things or an office and bits, and because it's not quite industrial units that size, but it's still very small scale. I'm just wondering if there's a gap in the market. I'm not necessarily saying we'll fill it, but I'm just intrigued if there is.
Thank you for the question. I like to describe our portfolio as offering the first rung in a ladder. So we provide the space for people to come out of their spare bedroom or out of their garage and take that small scale business space. What we've found traditionally is that the private sector is very willing and able to provide the second and third rung of the ladder, i.e. bigger space for once the business is established, and then they can take the risk of signing a 5-year lease and being committed to that 5-year lease. So I think geographically we do have a very good spread of locations across the whole county. I think we're covered there. I think the size of our property is right. And I think the legal aspect, if you like, by our flexible leases is also filling the gap. I think we hold that portfolio in the way that we do because the private sector wouldn't be willing to do so. The private sector could not take the risk of giving its tenants a rolling break at any time. So that really is, I do emphasise that is our unique selling point. We do provide new space from time to time, and we monitor the success of that. An example of that would be the hub at Holbeach, which we've provided some very small workshops there. and some office space. The reality is the office space has proven very popular. The very small micro workshops have been less popular. So we do test the market when budgets allow from time to time, but the evidence of our most recent experiment suggests we're in the right market with the physical properties that we offer, where we offer them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And just one more thing, I know it's more probably classed as district responsibility. Have you had any sort of experience with pop-up shops?
The short answer is no. We haven't got involved directly in the high street, actually. The closest we would get is at one of our estates at Long Sutton, which we refer to as Hoddins Way. I would say we have some crazy retail units in there in terms of one of our tenants is a nail bar operator. We also have a cafe, but we do not, and we have never had a high street presence to offer that sort of pop-up shop offer. We don't have any properties in our portfolio that would lend themselves to that, so we would have to become acquisitive if we were to do that within economic infrastructure.
I'll take the risk of saying it again, and hopefully I won't have missed anybody this time. Are there any further comments or questions from any side of the chamber at all? No. Making sure that my peripheral vision gets used this time. In that case, thank you very much indeed for the report. I think you've gathered that the committee strongly endorses the very important work this council does in that area. The proposal before us is as follows. I move that the committee endorse the report and that our satisfaction be recorded on the detail of measures employed to review the council's portfolio of business premises. I beg your pardon. I also move that the committee's feedback on the structured interview format, which I think you may take as positive because nobody expressed a view, and I do think that, is shared with relevant officers and portfolio holders for their information and further actioning. Any dissent from that? If so, please show now. In that case, thank you very much. That is agreed. So we now move to item 9, the last item on the agenda, the committee work programme, and you will find this item on pages 245 to 250 of the agenda pack, and it enables the committee to comment on the content of the work programme. It will be presented by Chiara Hazianu, Scrutiny Officer, and our actions are to review the work programme and highlight any additional scrutiny activity which would be included for consideration in it. Over to you, Chiara.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So, yes, in the interest of saving time, I just would like to take your attention to page 246 and to our next meeting, which is to be held on the 9th of July 2024. We will be taking 4 reports at that meeting as things stand at the moment. We're anticipating the adult learning provision for 2023-2024 and plans for the 24-25 academic year. We are due the Business Lincolnshire Growth Hub Annual Performance and Future Business Support Landscape Report, which is also an annual position report. We will be reviewing Q4 service level performance reporting on the KPIs for economy, flooding and waste. And last but not least, we are due a paper on the transition of local enterprise partnerships. Other than that, the work programme has not been amended or changed since the publication of this agenda pack. However, until the next meeting, we may have any changes in accordance with the forward plan for the council. If there's any other items that members would like to bring to my attention, please do that either now or offline. And the same goes for officers. I am working with them constantly to make sure that the work programme remains up to date and that the needs and wishes of this committee are reflected through the works programme for the next few months. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chiara. Does any member have a question or a comment? I am seeing none. In that case, the proposal before us is, I move that we note the report and approve the existing work programme as detailed in pages 245 to 250. Does anyone dissent? I am seeing no dissent. Thank you very much. That is agreed. And that brings us at slightly after 12:15, which was our programme time, at almost 10 minutes past 1, 8 minutes past 1, to the end of the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Thank you to those who have followed the meeting on our live stream or website. And that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much.